The boardroom was silent except for the sound of Ethan Moore's racing heart. He stood frozen, barely breathing, as Victoria Hale, the CEO whose name alone commanded entire industries, stepped close enough that he could smell her perfume. Her fingers brushed his collar, adjusting his crooked tie with a precision that felt impossibly intimate. For 3 seconds that stretched into eternity, the most powerful woman he'd ever met treated him like he mattered. And in that moment, something inside Ethan, something he'd buried under years of exhaustion and loss, cracked wide open. If you're watching from your city right now, drop a comment below telling me where you're from. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're ready for a journey about second chances, hidden strength, and the courage to trust again, hit that like button and stay with me until the very end. This is a story that will change how you see power, love, and what it means to truly be seen. Ethan Moore had learned to make himself small. Not physically, though his shoulders had developed a permanent slight hunch from years of bracing against disappointment, but in the way he moved through the world. He'd mastered the art of occupying minimal space, of being present without being noticed, of existing in the margins of other people's attention. It was a survival skill he'd perfected in the 3 years since Sarah died. The morning of the interview, he woke at 5:30 to Mia's small hand patting his face. His daughter was 6 years old, with her mother's dark curls and a smile that could make him forget, just for a moment, how tired he was. "Daddy," she whispered, her breath sweet with sleep. "Is today the big day?" Ethan pulled her close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "Yeah, baby. Today's the big day. Are you scared?" He thought about lying. Parents did that, didn't they? Shielded their children from the sharp edges of adult anxiety. But he and Mia had built their small world on honesty, on the understanding that they only had each other and therefore couldn't afford the luxury of pretending. "A little," he admitted, "but sometimes being scared means something matters." She considered this with the seriousness she brought to everything, her small face solemn. "Mommy used to say that brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing things even when you are." The words hit him like they always did, Sarah's wisdom, alive in their daughter's voice. He kissed Mia's forehead and forced brightness into his tone. "Your mom was the smartest person I ever knew." "And the prettiest," Mia added loyally. "And the prettiest," he agreed. They went through their morning routine with the practiced efficiency of a 2-person unit that had learned to function seamlessly. Ethan made chocolate chip pancakes, Mia's favorite, while she set the table with exaggerated care, positioning each fork and napkin with perfect symmetry. He packed her lunch while she brushed her teeth. They moved around each other in their small apartment kitchen like dancers who'd rehearsed the choreography 1,000 times. Mrs. Chen from 4B had agreed to take Mia to school and watch her after until Ethan got back. The elderly woman had become their unofficial family since Sarah's death, one of those quiet angels who showed up with soup when Mia was sick and never mentioned the times Ethan's rent was late. "You look handsome," Mrs. Chen said when she arrived, adjusting Ethan's tie with gentle hands. "Very professional." Ethan caught sight of himself in the mirror by the door. The suit was 6 years old, bought for Sarah's company holiday party, back when life was different. It was slightly loose now. He'd lost weight he couldn't afford to lose, but it was clean and pressed. His shoes were polished. His resume was printed on good paper. He looked like a man trying very hard to convince the world he wasn't drowning. "Thank you for this," he told Mrs. Chen, not for the first time. She waved him off. "Mia and I are going to make cookies. You go show them what you're made of." The subway ride downtown took 45 minutes. Ethan spent it reviewing everything he knew about Hale Industries. Victoria Hale had built the company from nothing over 15 years, growing it from a small consulting firm into a major player in corporate strategy and restructuring. She was known for being brilliant, demanding, and utterly uncompromising. The business magazines called her the woman who never blinks. Forbes had recently listed her among the most powerful CEOs under 40. Ethan had applied for a senior project coordinator position on a whim, expecting nothing. His background was solid. Before Sarah got sick, he'd been climbing steadily in project management at a mid-sized firm. But 3 years of reduced hours, of leaving early for doctor's appointments and missing deadlines because his wife was dying had derailed everything. His last employer had been understanding right up until they'd let him go 6 months after Sarah's funeral. Since then, he'd been piecing together contract work, draining his savings, watching the numbers in his bank account dwindle with terrifying speed. This job, if he somehow got it, would change everything. Stable income, benefits, health insurance that didn't have a $5,000 deductible, a future that extended beyond next month's rent. Hale Industries occupied the top 12 floors of a glass tower in the financial district. Ethan stood on the sidewalk for a moment, staring up at the building, feeling small and out of place. Through the soaring lobby windows, he could see people moving with purpose. Men in expensive suits, women in designer heels, everyone looking like they belonged in this world of polished marble and abstract art. "You can do this," he whispered to himself. Then, because Mia's voice was always in his head, brave isn't about not being scared. The lobby was even more intimidating up close. His footsteps echoed on the marble floor as he approached the security desk. The guard, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, checked his ID and directed him to the elevators. 38th floor, the guard said. "Good luck." Ethan wondered if his nervousness was that obvious. The elevator was empty except for a woman in a charcoal suit who got off on 22. As the floors climbed, Ethan watched the city shrink below him, buildings transforming into a geometric landscape of glass and steel. Up here, the world looked ordered, controlled. Up here, nothing was chaotic or uncertain. He wished he lived in that world. The 38th floor reception area was all clean lines and muted colors. A young man sat behind a curved desk, his expression professionally pleasant. "Ethan Moore," Ethan said. "I have a 9:30 interview." "Of course, Mr. Moore. Please have a seat. Ms. Hale will be with you shortly." Ethan's stomach dropped. "I'm sorry. Ms. Hale? I thought I was interviewing with the HR director." The receptionist smiled. "Ms. Hale conducts all final round interviews personally. She'll be about 10 minutes. Can I get you water? Coffee?" "Water would be great. Thank you." Ethan sat on a pristine white couch that probably cost more than his monthly rent and tried to control his breathing. He hadn't prepared to meet Victoria Hale. He'd researched the company, rehearsed answers about project management methodology and stakeholder coordination, prepared questions about team structure and reporting lines. He hadn't prepared to sit across from a woman whose net worth had more zeros than he could comfortably conceptualize. The receptionist returned with water in a real glass, not plastic. Ethan sipped it carefully, hyper-aware of his hands, terrified of spilling. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Ethan wondered if this was a test. See how the candidate handles waiting, handles uncertainty. He sat perfectly still, his resume folder balanced on his knee, and practiced the breathing technique his grief counselor had taught him. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. "Mr. Moore?" Ethan looked up to find a woman standing in the doorway to the inner offices. She was tall, probably 5'9", with dark hair pulled back in a style that was elegant without being severe. She wore a navy suit that fit like it had been made for her body specifically, and her posture radiated the kind of confidence that came from never doubting you belonged exactly where you were. Victoria Hale. Ethan stood quickly, too quickly, his water nearly sloshing over the rim of the glass. He set it down and extended his hand. "Ms. Hale, it's an honor to meet you." Her handshake was firm, brief, professional. Her eyes were gray, he noticed, and direct in a way that made him feel simultaneously exposed and seen. "Please, come in." He followed her down a corridor lined with photographs. Victoria at various company milestones, Victoria accepting awards, Victoria shaking hands with people Ethan vaguely recognized from business news. She moved with economical grace, each step purposeful. The boardroom was mostly windows, offering a panoramic view of the city. A long table dominated the center, its surface so polished Ethan could see his reflection in it. Victoria gestured to a chair on one side while she took the seat across from him. "Thank you for coming in," she said, settling a leather portfolio in front of her. "I've reviewed your resume and your references. Your background is impressive." "Thank you," Ethan managed. His mouth felt dry despite the water. "You were with Meridian Solutions for 6 years, senior project manager by the time you left. Strong performance reviews across the board. Victoria looked up from the portfolio, her gaze level. Then a 3-year gap with only contract work. Can you tell me about that? This was the question Ethan had been dreading. He'd prepared an answer, something vague about family circumstances and personal matters. But sitting across from Victoria Hale, in this room where the morning light cut through the windows with startling clarity, the prepared answer felt wrong. She was looking at him with complete attention, waiting. Not impatient, not judging, just waiting. My wife got sick, Ethan said quietly. Cancer. It was aggressive. She fought for 18 months and I needed to be there. For her and for our daughter. My employer was understanding at first, but eventually they needed someone more reliable. I don't blame them. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. How old is your daughter? 6. Her name is Mia. That must be difficult, managing single parenthood and a career. It's the most important thing I've ever done, Ethan said. Everything else is secondary. Victoria made a note in her portfolio. Tell me about a time when you had to coordinate multiple stakeholders with competing priorities on a tight deadline. The interview shifted into more standard territory. Ethan walked her through a project from his Meridian days, a system implementation that had involved coordinating IT, finance, operations, and executive leadership across a compressed timeline. He explained his approach to stakeholder management, conflict resolution, deadline tracking. Victoria asked follow-up questions that demonstrated she actually understood project management, that she wasn't just reading from a script. She challenged some of his assumptions, pushed him to explain his reasoning. It was intense, but exhilarating in a way Ethan hadn't experienced in years. This was what professional conversation felt like. This was what it meant to be evaluated on competence rather than pity. They talked for 40 minutes. Ethan found himself relaxing incrementally, his answers coming more naturally. Victoria was demanding but not cruel, challenging but not dismissive. When he admitted he didn't know something, the latest version of a specific software platform, she nodded approvingly. Good. I'd rather have someone who admits gaps than someone who pretends expertise they don't have. Finally, she closed the portfolio and leaned back slightly. Do you have any questions for me? Ethan had prepared 3 questions. Smart questions about growth trajectory and team culture and strategic vision. But as he looked at Victoria Hale, really looked at her, he found himself asking something different. Why do you conduct all the final interviews yourself? You must have hundreds of employees. That's a massive time commitment. For the first time, something like a smile touched Victoria's face. Because I've learned that culture flows from the top. Every person I hire shapes this company. I need to look people in the eye and understand who they are, not just what their resume says they can do. She paused. Most candidates don't ask me that. Most candidates are probably smarter than me. Or less honest. Victoria stood, and Ethan scrambled to his feet. Thank you for your time, Mr. Moore. We'll be in touch by end of week. It was clearly a dismissal, the interview concluded. Ethan gathered his portfolio and turned toward the door. Then he felt her hand on his arm. He stopped, startled. Victoria had stepped close, closer than professional distance required. She was looking at his chest, her expression focused. Your tie, she said quietly. Before Ethan could process what was happening, Victoria reached up and adjusted his tie. Her fingers worked with quick precision, straightening the knot that had gone crooked during the interview. She was close enough that he could see the fine texture of her suit fabric, close enough to notice she smelled like something expensive and subtle. Cedar, maybe, or sandalwood. The whole interaction lasted perhaps 5 seconds. But in those seconds, Ethan's brain short-circuited. It wasn't attraction, or not just attraction. It was the shock of being touched with care. The unexpectedness of this powerful woman, this CEO who commanded boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, taking a moment to adjust his tie like it mattered. Like he mattered. When was the last time someone had touched him with simple human kindness? Victoria stepped back, and Ethan realized he'd stopped breathing. There, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Much better. Thank you, Ethan managed. His voice came out rough. Something flickered across Victoria's face, awareness maybe, or acknowledgement of the moment's strange intimacy. Then it was gone, replaced by professional composure. The elevator is to your right. Safe travels, Mr. Moore. Ethan walked out of the boardroom in a daze. He made it to the elevator, into the lobby, out onto the street before the full weight of what had happened hit him. He'd survived the interview. He'd held his own with Victoria Hale, answered her questions, demonstrated his competence. The job was still possible, but more than that, in that brief moment when she'd fixed his tie, when she'd touched him with casual care, something had cracked open inside him. Some locked room he'd been avoiding since Sarah died. The realization that he'd been so starved for human connection that a simple gesture could shake him this badly. Ethan stood on the sidewalk, people flowing around him like water around a stone, and let himself feel it. The loneliness he'd been denying, the exhaustion that went bone deep, the fear that he was failing Mia by being so empty, so depleted. Then he pulled out his phone and called Mrs. Chen. "How'd it go?" she asked immediately. "I don't know," Ethan said honestly. "I really don't know." "But you did it. You went. You tried." "Yeah, I did." "Then come home. Mia's been asking about you every 10 minutes. We're making chocolate cookies shaped like hearts." Ethan smiled despite everything. "I'll be there in an hour." He rode the subway back to his neighborhood, watching the city transform from gleaming towers to residential blocks to his own corner of Brooklyn, where the buildings were shorter and the streets narrower, and everything felt human-scaled. Home. Mrs. Chen's apartment smelled like vanilla and chocolate. Mia launched herself at Ethan the moment he walked in, wrapping her small arms around his waist. "Did you get it?" she demanded. "Did they say yes?" "They're going to let me know by Friday," Ethan explained, kneeling so they were eye level. "But I did my best. That's all we can do, right?" Mia studied his face with that unnerving perception children sometimes have. "You look different." "Different how?" "Less tired. More like you." Ethan pulled her close, breathing in flour and chocolate and strawberry shampoo. "I love you, Mia mine." "Love you more," she said automatically. It was their routine, their call and response. That night, after Mia was asleep, Ethan sat at their small kitchen table with his laptop and did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He updated his LinkedIn profile, added his recent contract work, polished his summary, requested recommendations from former colleagues. He was probably getting ahead of himself. The interview had gone well, but well didn't guarantee anything. Victoria Hale probably interviewed dozens of candidates for every position. He was one face in a long line of qualified applicants. But he couldn't shake the memory of her adjusting his tie, the careful attention in her eyes, the sense that she'd actually seen him, not just as a resume, not just as a set of skills, but as a person. When was the last time someone had looked at him that way? Wednesday came and went. Thursday dragged. Ethan checked his email obsessively, his phone never more than arm's reach away. He told himself to be realistic, to manage expectations. He'd been through enough disappointment to know better than to hope too hard. Friday morning, he was making Mia breakfast when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Hello? Mr. Moore? This is Jennifer Chen from Hale Industries HR. Do you have a moment?" Ethan's heart stopped. "Yes, absolutely. Ms. Hale would like to extend an offer for the Senior Project Coordinator position. The formal offer letter will be emailed within the hour, but she wanted you to know as soon as possible." The kitchen tilted. Ethan gripped the counter for balance. "Mr. Moore, are you there?" "Yes," he managed. "I'm here. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much." The offer letter will include all the details: compensation, benefits, start date. Ms. Hale is hoping you can begin Monday, if that works with your schedule. Monday. 4 days away. "Monday is perfect," Ethan said. He hung up and stood frozen in his kitchen, phone still in his hand. Through the window, morning light slanted across the fire escape. Somewhere in the building, someone was playing music. Normal sounds, normal life. Except nothing was normal anymore. "Daddy?" Mia appeared in the doorway, her hair sticking up in sleep-wild tangles. "Why are you crying?" Ethan laughed and wiped his eyes. He hadn't realized he was crying. "Come here, baby." She climbed into his lap, fitting perfectly, like she always did. "Remember that job I interviewed for? The important one?" Mia nodded solemnly. "I got it." Her face transformed, pure joy, uncomplicated by adult understanding of what this meant beyond "daddy's happy." She threw her arms around his neck and squeezed with all her 6-year-old strength. "I knew you would. I knew it." Ethan held his daughter and let himself believe, just for a moment, that maybe things could actually get better. That the last 3 years of survival mode might finally be ending. That he might be allowed to do more than just survive. The offer letter arrived at 10:47 a.m. The salary was more than Ethan had made at Meridian. Enough for a better apartment, for Mia's school expenses, for savings. The benefits were comprehensive. Health insurance that would cover therapy for Mia, dental, vision, even a 401k match. Security, stability, a future. Ethan signed the acceptance letter with shaking hands and sent it back within 15 minutes. That weekend, he took Mia to her favorite park. They fed ducks, played on the swings, ate ice cream even though it was barely 60 degrees outside. She chattered about school, about her friend Emma's birthday party, about a book she wanted from the library. Normal, beautiful, ordinary life. Saturday night, after Mia was asleep, Ethan allowed himself to think about Victoria Hale, about the way she'd looked at him in that boardroom, the questions she'd asked that went beyond standard interview protocol, the moment she'd fixed his tie. He didn't let himself read too much into it. She was his boss now, his boss's boss, really, several levels removed from his daily reality. Whatever that moment had been, it was over. Probably meant nothing to her anyway. But he couldn't deny the small flutter in his chest when he thought about seeing her again. About working in that building, being part of something bigger than contract jobs and survival mode. About maybe, possibly, being more than just a man trying not to drown. Monday morning arrived with the sharp clarity of a new beginning. Ethan, dressed in his interview suit, kissed a sleepy Mia goodbye and rode the subway downtown with his heart hammering. The security guard from his interview smiled in recognition. "Welcome to the team." "Thank you," Ethan said, and meant it with every cell in his body. HR orientation took most of the morning: paperwork, ID badge, system access, benefits enrollment. Jennifer Chen walked him through everything with patient efficiency, answering his questions without making him feel stupid for asking. "You'll be working primarily with the strategy implementation team," she explained. "Your direct supervisor is Marcus Webb, VP of Strategic Operations. He's expecting you at 1 o'clock for team introductions." "And Ms. Hale?" Ethan asked, trying to sound casual. "Will I be working directly with her?" Jennifer smiled. "Ms. Hale is very involved with major projects, but day-to-day you'll report through Marcus. She has an open-door policy, though. Anyone can request time on her calendar if they need guidance." An open-door policy that probably got used about as often as people requested meetings with the president, Ethan thought. At 1 o'clock, he made his way to the 35th floor and Marcus Webb's office. Marcus turned out to be a trim man in his 50s with silver hair and an easy smile. He shook Ethan's hand warmly. "Welcome aboard. Jennifer speaks highly of your background. We're lucky to have you." The team was small, only 6 people including Ethan. They gathered in a conference room for introductions. There was Rachel, a project analyst in her late 20s who smiled genuinely and offered to show him the best coffee spots. David and James, both senior coordinators who'd been with the company for years. Priya, a brilliant data specialist who spoke quietly but commanded immediate respect. And Marcus, who ran the meeting with calm authority. "We're in the middle of a major restructuring project for one of our key clients," Marcus explained. "Manufacturing company, about 3,000 employees dealing with supply chain integration issues. Ethan, I'm going to have you shadow Rachel for this week, get familiar with our processes and tools. Then we'll get you assigned to your own work stream." "Sounds good," Ethan said. "Thank you for the opportunity." The afternoon blurred past in a flood of new information. Rachel walked him through project documentation, stakeholder maps, status reporting protocols. Everything was more sophisticated than his previous roles. Better systems, clearer processes, higher stakes. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. At 5:30, Rachel logged off with a cheerful, "See you tomorrow," and Ethan realized most of the office had already emptied out. He should go too. Mrs. Chen was watching Mia, but he didn't want to take advantage. He was packing his laptop when movement outside the conference room caught his eye. Victoria Hale walked past, her phone to her ear, her expression focused. She was nodding at something the person on the other end was saying, her free hand gesturing slightly as she talked. Ethan froze, watching through the glass wall. She looked exactly as he remembered, poised, purposeful, completely in command. But there was something else too, something he hadn't noticed during the interview, a tightness around her eyes, a set to her shoulders that suggested she'd been carrying weight for a very long time. As if feeling his gaze, Victoria glanced toward the conference room. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither moved. Then Victoria smiled, small, brief, but unmistakably real, and continued down the hallway. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. It was nothing. A professional acknowledgement. Boss seeing new employee, normal interaction. But his hands were shaking as he packed his bag. The first week passed in a controlled chaos of learning. Ethan absorbed information like a sponge, stayed late reviewing documentation, asked questions until he understood not just the what, but the why. Rachel proved to be an excellent teacher, patient with his questions and generous with her knowledge. By Friday, Marcus pulled him aside. "You're picking this up faster than anyone I've seen. I'm going to assign you to the Reynolds account work stream starting Monday. Think you're ready?" "Absolutely," Ethan said, hoping he sounded more confident than he felt. That night, riding home on the subway, Ethan let himself acknowledge how good it felt. The challenge, the learning curve, the sense of building towards something. For 3 years, his world had been about managing loss and preventing further catastrophe. Now, suddenly, he was building again. Mia sensed the change in him. She'd started asking more questions about his work, about the people he worked with, about what his days were like. He told her age-appropriate versions, the interesting projects, the kind colleagues, the beautiful office view. He didn't mention Victoria Hale, even though he thought about her more than he should. Their paths crossed occasionally in the office, a nod in the hallway, a brief exchange in the elevator. Once, passing in the lobby, she'd asked, "How are you settling in, Mr. Moore?" "Very well, thank you. The team has been incredibly welcoming." "Good. That's what I like to hear. Always professional, always appropriate. Nothing to read into." Except Ethan found himself reading into everything, the way she remembered his name, the brief warmth in her smile, the sense that when Victoria looked at him, she actually saw him, not just as an employee, but as a person. He told himself he was being ridiculous, projecting connection where none existed. Victoria Hale was his boss, a woman so far removed from his reality that any fantasy of connection was absurd. But late at night, after Mia was asleep, Ethan sometimes let himself remember the moment in the boardroom, the careful touch of her fingers on his tie, the closeness that had felt charged with something beyond professionalism, the way his heart had stopped, just for a second, when she looked at him. It meant nothing, he reminded himself. It was a kind gesture from a boss who valued professionalism and presentation. Nothing more. But in the dark of his bedroom, alone with his thoughts, Ethan couldn't quite make himself believe it. The Reynolds project consumed Ethan's second week at Hale Industries with the relentless intensity of a riptide. What had seemed manageable during Marcus's initial briefing transformed into a sprawling challenge involving 17 stakeholders, conflicting timelines, and a client CEO who changed his mind with alarming frequency. Ethan thrived on it. He found himself arriving earlier each morning, staying later each evening. The work demanded everything: analytical thinking, diplomatic communication, constant adaptation. And for the first time in 3 years, he felt like his brain was firing on all cylinders again. Not just surviving, but actually engaged with something that mattered beyond immediate crisis management. The team noticed. Rachel started deferring to his judgment on stakeholder communications. Marcus included him in strategy sessions typically reserved for senior staff. Even Priya, who rarely offered unsolicited opinions, mentioned that his approach to data visualization made complex issues accessible to non-technical executives. "You have a gift for translation," she said one afternoon, studying the dashboard he'd created. "You take what I make and turn it into something leaders can actually use to make decisions." "That's the job, isn't it?" Ethan replied, but he felt the compliment warm something inside him that had been cold for a very long time. By Thursday of his second week, Ethan was running on 5 hours of sleep and too much coffee. He'd stayed until nearly midnight the previous night reconciling conflicting data sets, then been up at 5:30 when Mia crawled into his bed complaining of a nightmare. The day had been a blur of meetings and deadline pressure. At 7 in the evening, he was alone in the conference room, staring at his laptop screen with eyes that felt full of sand, when the door opened. Victoria Hale stepped inside. Ethan scrambled to his feet, nearly knocking over his coffee mug. "Miss Hale, I'm sorry. I didn't realize anyone else was still here." "Sit down, Mr. Moore. You look exhausted." She closed the door behind her and set a leather portfolio on the table. "Marcus tells me you've been putting in 12-hour days on the Reynolds account." "The timeline is aggressive," Ethan said carefully, sinking back into his chair. "I'm just making sure we stay on track." Victoria pulled out the chair across from him, her movements as precise as always. She'd shed her suit jacket sometime during the day, and her white blouse was crisp despite the late hour. Where Ethan felt rumpled and depleted, she looked as composed as she had that morning. "Marcus also tells me you're doing exceptional work, that your stakeholder analysis identified risks his team had missed, and that you've already built stronger relationships with Reynolds' operations team than we had in the previous 6 months." Ethan felt heat creep up his neck. "I'm just trying to add value." "You're succeeding." Victoria opened her portfolio and pulled out a document. "I wanted to discuss something with you directly, rather than going through channels." Ethan's stomach tightened. Direct conversations with the CEO were either very good or very bad, and he couldn't read Victoria's expression well enough to guess which. "We have a new client," Victoria continued. "Technology startup, growing fast, struggling with operational scaling. They need someone to come in and essentially build their project management infrastructure from scratch. It's high visibility, high stakes work." She slid the document across the table. Ethan scanned it quickly. Scope of work, timeline, deliverables. It was ambitious. Maybe too ambitious for someone in his second week. "I want you to lead it," Victoria said. Ethan's head snapped up. "Lead it? Ms. Hale, I've been here 2 weeks. I'm aware of the timeline. Marcus has people who've been with the company for years. David and James both have more experience. David and James are excellent at executing established processes," Victoria interrupted, her tone gentle but firm. "But they don't innovate. They don't see around corners. You do." She gestured at his laptop. "What you built for Reynolds in 10 days would have taken them 3 weeks, and it wouldn't have been as good." Ethan stared at the document, his mind racing. This is a huge opportunity. Yes. And a huge risk. If I fail, you won't fail. Victoria's certainty was absolute. "I wouldn't offer this if I had doubts about your capability, but I need you to be honest with me. Can you handle this workload? You have a young daughter. I don't want to put you in a position where you're choosing between your career and your family." The directness of the question caught Ethan off guard. Most employers paid lip service to work-life balance while implicitly expecting unlimited availability. Victoria was asking him to actually assess the trade-offs. "Mia is my priority," Ethan said slowly. "Always. But she's also the reason I work hard. I want her to see that dedication matters, that showing up and doing excellent work matters." He met Victoria's eyes. "I can handle this. I'll need to be smart about my time, but I can do it." Something shifted in Victoria's expression, approval maybe, or recognition. "Then it's yours. You'll have budget for additional support if you need it. Build your team however makes sense." "Thank you." The words felt inadequate for the magnitude of what she was offering. "I won't let you down." "I know." Victoria stood, collecting her portfolio. "One more thing. Make sure you're eating dinner. You look like you've lost weight since your interview." She was out the door before Ethan could formulate a response. He sat alone in the conference room, staring at the document that represented both opportunity and terrifying responsibility, and wondered how Victoria Hale had noticed he'd lost weight, wondered what it meant that she'd noticed at all. Then he pushed the thought aside, packed his laptop, and headed home to Mia. The apartment was quiet when he arrived. Mrs. Chen had left a note on the kitchen table saying Mia had finished her homework and was already asleep. Ethan peeked into his daughter's room, watching the gentle rise and fall of her breathing, and felt the familiar ache of guilt. Another late night. Another evening missed. But this was for her. This opportunity, this career trajectory. It was all building toward a life where he could give her stability, security, the childhood she deserved. He just hoped she understood that. The new project launched on Monday with a kickoff meeting that included the client's entire leadership team. Ethan had prepared obsessively over the weekend, building a presentation that balanced strategic vision with tactical clarity. He'd practiced his delivery while Mia colored at the kitchen table, her occasional, "That sounds smart, Daddy," providing encouragement. Now, standing in a conference room full of executives who'd built a company from nothing and were clearly skeptical that a project coordinator could solve their problems, Ethan felt his confidence waver. Then Victoria walked in. She hadn't mentioned she'd be attending. Ethan's carefully rehearsed opening caught in his throat as she took a seat at the back of the room, her expression neutral, but her presence impossible to ignore. "Please continue, Mr. Moore," she said calmly. Ethan continued. He walked them through his assessment of their current state, the bottlenecks, the communication gaps, the absence of standardized processes that was causing the same problems to repeat across different teams. He presented a phased approach to building project management infrastructure, explaining not just what needed to happen, but why it mattered to their bottom line. The client CEO, a woman named Sarah Chen, who'd founded the company in her garage 5 years earlier, asked pointed questions. Ethan answered without deflecting, acknowledging what he didn't know while demonstrating expertise in what he did. 45 minutes in, Sarah leaned back in her chair and exchanged glances with her COO. "This is the most coherent plan anyone's presented to us," she said. "When can you start?" "We already have," Ethan replied, and outlined the immediate next steps. After the client left, Victoria lingered in the doorway. "Well done," she said simply. "Thank you for being here," Ethan replied. Having the CEO present sent a message about how seriously we take this engagement. Victoria's lips curved slightly. "I came because I wanted to see you present." The message to the client was secondary. She left before Ethan could process that statement. The weeks blurred together in a rhythm of intense work punctuated by moments of stunning clarity. Ethan built his team carefully, pulling in Rachel for analytical support and negotiating for a junior coordinator to handle administrative details. He established weekly check-ins with the client, created transparent reporting dashboards, and slowly, methodically began untangling the operational chaos that had been strangling their growth. It was exhausting. It was also the most professionally fulfilled he'd felt since before Sarah got sick. At home, he tried to be present for Mia. They maintained their morning routine, pancakes and conversation, and the small rituals that grounded them both. He read to her every night before bed, voices and all, even when his eyes were closing from exhaustion. On weekends, he carved out time that was just theirs, parks and museums, and lazy afternoons where work didn't exist. But Mia was perceptive in the way children are, and she noticed. "You're happy now," she said one Saturday morning while they were making French toast together. "Different happy than before." Ethan measured vanilla carefully. "What do you mean, baby?" "Before you were happy when you were with me, but the rest of the time you looked worried. Now you look happy even when you're thinking about work." The observation landed like a physical blow. He set down the measuring spoon and knelt so they were eye level. "You're right," he said. "I am happy. This job, it's good for us, for both of us. But you're still the most important thing in my life. Always." Mia studied his face with those serious eyes she'd inherited from Sarah. "I know, Daddy, and I'm glad you're happy at work too. Mommy always said you were really good at your job." Ethan pulled her close, breathing in strawberry shampoo and fighting the perpetual ache of grief. Sarah should be here for this. Should see him finding his footing again, building a career that mattered. Should be proud of their daughter's emotional intelligence and kindness. "Your mom was really good at everything," he said when he could trust his voice, "including raising you to be the most amazing person I know." They finished making breakfast together, and Ethan pushed the grief back down into the locked room where he kept it. Later. He could process it later. Right now, Mia needed him present and whole. That night, after she was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and worked on the client presentation for Monday's executive briefing. He was deep in crafting a slide about risk mitigation when his phone buzzed with an email from Victoria Hale, sent at 10:47 p.m. on a Saturday. Subject line: question about your approach. Ethan's pulse quickened as he opened it. Mr. Moore, I was reviewing the project documentation you submitted and noticed your stakeholder engagement strategy differs significantly from our standard framework. Can you explain your reasoning? I'm particularly interested in why you're investing so heavily in building relationships with the client's mid-level managers, rather than focusing primarily on executive sponsors. VH. It was a professional question, a legitimate inquiry about methodology, nothing to make his heart race. But she'd been reviewing his documentation at nearly 11 o'clock on a Saturday night, which meant she was working, which meant she was as consumed by the company as he was by his projects. Ethan drafted a response, deleted it, drafted again. He wanted to be thorough without being defensive, confident without being arrogant. After 20 minutes, he had something he could send. Ms. Hale, the executive sponsors control budget and strategic direction, but the mid-level managers control implementation. In my experience, projects fail more often from operational resistance than from lack of executive support. By building strong relationships with the people who will actually execute the changes, we create advocates throughout the organization rather than directives from the top that may not stick. The time investment upfront pays dividends in smoother implementation and sustainable change. Happy to discuss further if you'd like. EM. He hit send before he could overthink it further. The response came 4 minutes later. Smart. That's exactly the kind of strategic thinking that made me offer you this project. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. VH. Ethan stared at his phone screen, analyzing the message for subtext that probably didn't exist. Professional praise. Normal boss-employee interaction. Nothing more. But something warm had settled in his chest. Something that had nothing to do with professional validation and everything to do with the fact that Victoria Hale was thinking about his work at 11 on a Saturday night. Monday's executive briefing went smoothly. The client leadership team approved his recommendations, and Sarah Chen pulled him aside afterward. I have to admit, I was skeptical when Victoria assigned someone so new to our account, she said. But you've proven me wrong. You understand our business better than consultants who've been studying us for months. I just listen, Ethan said. Your team knows what the problems are. My job is creating the structure for them to solve those problems effectively. Sarah smiled. See that right there? Most consultants come in acting like they have all the answers. You come in asking the right questions. It makes all the difference. The praise carried Ethan through the rest of the week. He was building something meaningful, creating value, making a difference. It felt like resurrection. Not from the grief of losing Sarah, but from the professional death that had followed. For 3 years, he'd been treading water. Now he was swimming with purpose. Friday afternoon, Marcus called him into his office. Close the door, Marcus said, and Ethan's stomach dropped. Private conversations with closed doors were rarely casual. Is something wrong? Ethan asked, taking the offered seat. Wrong? No. Unexpected? Definitely. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying Ethan with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. Victoria wants you in the executive strategy session Monday morning. Ethan blinked. I'm sorry, what? The executive strategy session, monthly meeting where department heads and the C-suite discuss major initiatives, resource allocation, strategic priorities. She specifically requested your attendance. But I don't. Ethan struggled to form a coherent thought. That's a senior leadership meeting. I've been here 6 weeks. I'm aware, Marcus said dryly. And I'll be honest, it's unusual. Victoria doesn't typically invite individual contributors to those sessions, even senior ones. But she was explicit. She wants your perspective on operational scaling challenges. Did she say why? She said you have insights that would benefit the strategic discussion. And when Victoria Hale says she wants something, we make it happen. Marcus smiled slightly. Consider it recognition of the excellent work you've been doing, but also be prepared. Those meetings are intense. People come with strong opinions and aren't shy about defending them. Ethan left Marcus's office in a daze. An executive strategy session, 6 weeks into his tenure. It was either an extraordinary opportunity or a spectacular setup for failure, and he couldn't tell which. That weekend, he prepared like his career depended on it, which it might. He reviewed every major project in his portfolio, analyzed the operational challenges each faced, and identified patterns that suggested systemic issues. He built frameworks for thinking about scaling challenges and prepared talking points that were substantive without being presumptuous. Mia watched him work with patient concern. "Big meeting?" she asked Sunday afternoon, curled up on the couch with a library book while Ethan spread papers across the coffee table. "Very big," Ethan confirmed, "with important people." "You'll be great," she said with absolute certainty. "You're always great at your job." "How do you know?" Ethan asked, genuinely curious about his 6-year-old daughter's assessment of his professional competence. "Because you care," Mia said simply. "When you care about something, you work really hard to do it right, and people can tell." Out of the mouths of babes, Ethan thought, and wondered when his daughter had become so wise. Monday morning arrived with the crisp inevitability of Judgment Day. Ethan dressed in his best suit, not the interview suit, but the navy one he'd bought with his first paycheck from Hale Industries. He dropped Mia at school, absorbing her tight hug, and whispered, "Good luck, Daddy," then rode the subway downtown, rehearsing key points in his head. The executive strategy session was held in a conference room on the 40th floor, a space Ethan had never accessed before. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city. The conference table could seat 20, though only 12 chairs were occupied when Ethan arrived at precisely 8:58 a.m. Victoria sat at the head of the table, reviewing something on her tablet. She looked up as Ethan entered. "Mr. Moore, thank you for joining us. Please take a seat." The only empty chair was 3 seats down from Victoria, between the CFO and the VP of Client Services. Ethan sat carefully, hyper-aware of his posture, his breathing, the fact that he was the lowest-ranking person in the room by several levels. The meeting started promptly at 9. Victoria ran it with the same precision she brought to everything: clear agenda, time limits on discussion items, firm but fair moderation when debates got heated. Department heads presented updates on their areas, identified challenges, requested resources or strategic guidance. Ethan listened intently, taking mental notes, trying to understand not just the content, but the dynamics. Who deferred to whom? Where the real power resided beyond org charts. How decisions actually got made in rooms like this. An hour in, Victoria shifted the agenda. "I want to spend our remaining time on a strategic question," she said. "We're growing faster than at any point in the company's history. New clients, expanding teams, increasing complexity. But I'm seeing patterns that concern me. Projects running over timeline, client satisfaction scores declining slightly, employee burnout increasing. We're scaling, but not sustainably." She looked directly at Ethan. "Mr. Moore, you've been embedded in several client projects over the past 6 weeks. What are you seeing from the operational front lines?" Every head turned toward Ethan. He took a breath, called on every ounce of professional confidence he'd built over his career, and spoke. "I'm seeing 3 interconnected challenges," he began. "First, we're growing our client base faster than we're developing our internal systems. We're still operating with processes designed for a company half this size. Second, we're hiring for immediate needs without adequate onboarding and knowledge transfer, which creates short-term relief but long-term inefficiency. Third, and this is the hardest one, we're rewarding individual heroics over sustainable practices." The VP of Operations frowned. "What does that mean, rewarding heroics?" "It means we celebrate people who work 80-hour weeks and pull off miracles," Ethan said carefully. "Which is understandable. Those people save projects and keep clients happy. But it's not scalable, and it burns people out. We need to shift toward celebrating people who build systems that don't require heroics." The CFO leaned forward. "You're suggesting we change our entire performance culture." "I'm suggesting we evolve it," Ethan countered. "We can still value dedication and excellence, but we should also value efficiency, knowledge sharing, and sustainable work practices. Otherwise, we'll keep losing good people to burnout, and our growth will eventually hit a ceiling. Victoria's expression was unreadable. Go on. Ethan outlined his thinking, the patterns he'd observed, the systemic issues underlying tactical problems, the changes that could address root causes rather than symptoms. He spoke for 10 minutes, aware of the scrutiny, aware he was essentially critiquing the company's operational approach to a room full of executives who'd built that approach. When he finished, silence filled the room. Then Victoria spoke. Thank you. That's exactly the kind of honest assessment I was hoping for. She looked around the table. Reactions? The debate that followed was intense. Some executives agreed with Ethan's analysis. Others pushed back, arguing that the current approach had gotten them this far, and change was risky. Victoria moderated without revealing her own position, drawing out perspectives and pushing people to support their arguments with evidence. Ethan contributed when asked, but mostly listened, learning more about executive decision-making in 90 minutes than he had in years of middle management. Finally, Victoria called time. We'll revisit this with specific proposals next month. I want operations, HR, and finance to work together on options. She glanced at Ethan. Mr. Moore, I'd like you to participate in that working group. Your frontline perspective will be valuable. The meeting adjourned. Executives gathered papers, checked phones, filtered out in clusters of conversation. Ethan stood, his legs slightly unsteady, and nearly collided with the CFO. That took guts, the older man said quietly. Speaking truth to power your 7th week on the job. Risky, but smart. I just tried to be honest, Ethan replied. That's what made it risky. The CFO smiled slightly. Victoria values honesty, but not everyone does. Watch your back. It wasn't clear if that was advice or warning. Ethan made his way back to his desk in a fog. He'd just participated in executive strategy. He'd critiqued company operations in front of senior leadership. He'd either accelerated his career or destroyed it, and he wouldn't know which until the consequences played out. His phone buzzed with a meeting invitation. From Victoria Hale. Subject: follow-up discussion. Time: 4 o'clock that afternoon. Ethan's stomach knotted. Private meeting with the CEO, scheduled for end of business. Either he was getting promoted or fired, and the timing suggested he should prepare for either possibility. The afternoon crawled by. Ethan tried to focus on project work, but his concentration kept fragmenting. At 3:30, he gave up and spent the remaining time reviewing his performance documentation, just in case he needed to defend his value. At 3:58, he made his way to the 40th floor. Victoria's assistant waved him through. She's expecting you. Victoria's office was larger than Ethan had imagined, with the same floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist aesthetic that characterized the rest of the executive floor. She was standing at the window when he entered, her silhouette sharp against the afternoon light. "Close the door, please," she said without turning. Ethan closed the door and waited, his heart hammering. Victoria turned to face him, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked uncertain. "That was brave this morning," she said finally. "What you said in the strategy session, honest and brave." "I hope I didn't overstep," Ethan replied carefully. "You didn't." Victoria moved to her desk but didn't sit, instead leaning against it with a casualness that seemed uncharacteristic. "You said things I've been thinking but haven't figured out how to address. And you said them better than I could have. I just shared what I've observed. You did more than that. You articulated a cultural problem that's been bothering me for months." Victoria's gray eyes were direct, searching. "I built this company through force of will and relentless work. 90-hour weeks, sacrificing everything else, pushing until something broke. It worked. We grew, we succeeded, we won. But I'm starting to wonder if the cost was too high." The admission hung in the air between them, intimate in its vulnerability. "I don't know your whole story," Ethan said slowly, "but I know something about sacrifice, about pouring everything into survival and achievement and forgetting that there's supposed to be more to life than just not failing." Victoria's expression shifted, something raw flickering across her face. "You understand." "I'm learning to," Ethan admitted. "I'm still figuring out how to balance being excellent at my job with being present for my daughter, how to build a career without sacrificing everything else. And if you figure it out, Victoria said quietly, will you teach me? The question landed like a confession. Ethan stared at her, seeing for the first time past the polished authority to the woman underneath. Successful, beyond measure, but profoundly lonely. Powerful, but isolated by that power. I think we might be learning together, he said. Victoria held his gaze for a long moment, and Ethan felt something shift between them. Something that went beyond professional respect, beyond boss and employee. A recognition of shared struggle, shared understanding, dangerous territory. Victoria seemed to realize it at the same moment. She straightened, her professional mask sliding back into place with practiced ease. Thank you for your honesty in the strategy session, she said, her tone formal again. And for this conversation, I'll see you at the working group kickoff next week. It was a dismissal. Ethan recognized it and stood to leave. At the door, he paused and looked back. Victoria had returned to the window, her posture straight but somehow fragile in the fading afternoon light. Ms. Hale? He said quietly. She turned. I think you're doing better than you realize. At the balance thing, you noticed I'd lost weight. You asked about my daughter. You care about people, not just results. That matters more than you might think. He left before she could respond, but he carried the image of her surprised expression all the way home. That night, after Mia was asleep, Ethan sat in his darkened living room and tried to process what had happened. The strategy session, the private meeting, the moment when Victoria Hale had let her guard down and showed him something real. It was nothing, he told himself. Professional rapport. Mutual respect between colleagues who happened to share some life experiences. But his hands were shaking as he picked up his phone, and he couldn't quite convince himself that what he felt was purely professional admiration. Because somewhere between the interview and the tie fixing and the late-night email and the vulnerable conversation in her office, Ethan Moore had started to care about Victoria Hale as more than just his boss, and he had no idea what to do about that. The realization settled over Ethan like frost forming on glass, gradual, inevitable, and impossible to ignore. He spent the next 3 days trying to convince himself it was temporary, a side effect of professional admiration combined with the vulnerability of being seen. He'd been invisible for so long that any genuine attention felt magnified, significant beyond its actual weight. But Wednesday afternoon shattered that comfortable lie. The working group held its first session in a conference room on the 37th floor. Ethan arrived early, reviewing his notes, when Victoria walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. She set one in front of him without a word. Black, right? She said. I've noticed you take it black in the morning meetings. Ethan stared at the cup, something warm and terrifying blooming in his chest. She'd noticed how he took his coffee, had remembered, had brought him a cup without being asked. Thank you, he managed. The meeting itself was productive. The VP of Operations, the head of HR, and the CFO working through Ethan's observations with serious attention. But Ethan's concentration kept fragmenting, pulled repeatedly to Victoria's presence at the end of the table, the way she listened with complete focus, the rare smile that transformed her entire face when someone made a good point, the unconscious gesture of tucking a strand of hair behind her ear when she was thinking deeply. He was in trouble. After the meeting, he threw himself into work with desperate intensity. If he stayed busy enough, exhausted enough, maybe he could outrun the feelings taking root in his chest. The client project consumed his days. Evenings belonged to Mia. Late nights he filled with additional work, review of documentation, preparation for upcoming presentations. It helped. Mostly. Until Friday, when Mia got sick. It started with a cough Thursday evening. Nothing alarming, just the kind of minor cold kids picked up constantly. By Friday morning, she had a low fever. Ethan kept her home, called Mrs. Chen to check on her periodically, and went to work planning to leave early. At 2 p.m, Mrs. Chen called. Mia's fever had spiked to 103. She was lethargic, barely responsive. Ethan was in a client meeting when his phone buzzed repeatedly. He glanced down, saw Mrs. Chen's name, and felt his stomach drop. "I'm sorry," he said, interrupting the client mid-sentence. "I have to take this. Family emergency." He stepped into the hallway, his hands already shaking. "Mrs. Chen?" "Ethan, I think you need to come home. She's burning up and I can't get the fever down. I gave her the medicine you left, but it's not working. I'm leaving now. Call her pediatrician, see if they can see her this afternoon. If they can't, I'm taking her to urgent care." He ended the call and stood in the empty hallway, his mind racing through logistics. The client meeting needed to wrap up. He was the lead. They couldn't just cancel. But Mia needed him, right now, immediately. Rachel appeared at his elbow, her face concerned. "What happened?" "Mia, high fever. I have to go." "Go," Rachel said firmly. "I'll finish the meeting. I've been in all the prep sessions. I know the material." "Rachel, this is a critical presentation, which is why I'll handle it. Your daughter needs you. Go." Ethan grabbed his laptop and bag, moving on autopilot. He made it to the elevator before realizing he should probably tell Marcus he was leaving. Professional courtesy, protocol, all the normal workplace considerations that seemed absurdly irrelevant when his child was sick. He pulled out his phone to text Marcus and nearly collided with Victoria stepping out of her office. "Mr. Moore, I thought you were in the client presentation." "I was. I have to leave. My daughter is sick, high fever, and I—" The words tumbled out in a rush. "I'm sorry. Rachel's covering the meeting. She knows the material. I just need to go." Victoria's expression shifted instantly, from professional to concerned. "How high is the fever?" 103. She's 6. The medicine isn't bringing it down." "Have you called her doctor?" "My neighbor is calling now. I'm going straight home, then probably to urgent care or the ER depending on what the doctor says." Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Listen to me. Take her to Children's Presbyterian. Not urgent care, not a regular ER. Children's Presbyterian has a pediatric emergency department, and I know the head of pediatrics there. I'll call ahead. Make sure they're expecting you." Ethan's throat tightened. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." Victoria was already pulling out her phone. "What's your daughter's full name?" "Mia Sarah Moore. She's 6. No major medical history beyond normal childhood stuff." Victoria was typing rapidly. "I'm texting Dr. Patricia Newman now. She owes me a favor. Go. Take care of your daughter. Everything else can wait. The client meeting, Rachel will handle it, and I'll sit in to provide executive presence if needed. Ethan." She caught his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Your daughter comes first, always. Do you understand me?" The use of his first name hit him like a physical shock. In 2 months, she'd never used it. Always Mr. Moore, always professional distance. "Thank you," he whispered. "Go." Ethan went. The subway ride to Brooklyn felt interminable. He emerged at his stop and ran the 4 blocks to his building, his lungs burning, his mind conjuring every terrible possibility. Meningitis. Sepsis. The same cancer that had taken Sarah, somehow striking Mia despite all logic and medical probability. Mrs. Chen met him at the door, Mia limp in her arms. "The doctor said to bring her in immediately," Mrs. Chen said, her voice tight with worry. "They'll see her right away." Ethan took his daughter, feeling the frightening heat radiating from her small body. She opened her eyes briefly, unfocused and glassy. "Daddy?" "I'm here, baby. We're going to get you feeling better." He wrapped her in a blanket and carried her down to the street, hailing a cab with frantic gestures. The driver seemed to sense the urgency and navigated through traffic with aggressive efficiency. Children's Presbyterian Hospital appeared like a fortress of hope, its modern facade promising competence and care. Ethan carried Mia through the automatic doors into a pediatric emergency department that was busy but not chaotic. "Mia Moore," he said to the triage nurse. "Dr. Newman is expecting us." The nurse's expression shifted to recognition. "Room 4. Follow me." They were taken back immediately, bypassing the waiting room entirely. A young doctor appeared within minutes, introducing herself as Dr. Kim, one of Dr. Newman's residents. "Dr. Newman briefed me," she said, already examining Mia with gentle efficiency. "Let's see what's going on." The next hour blurred together. Temperature readings, throat swabs, a blood draw that made Mia cry weakly. Ethan held her hand through all of it, murmuring reassurance, feeling utterly helpless. Finally, Dr. Kim returned with results. "It's strep throat. which is why the regular fever reducer wasn't working well. We're going to start her on antibiotics and give her something stronger for the fever. She should start feeling better within 24 hours. Relief crashed over Ethan so powerfully, his knees nearly buckled. Just strep, that's all? Just strep, Dr. Kim confirmed with a kind smile. Common, treatable, nothing to worry about. She'll be running around again by Sunday. They kept Mia for observation for another hour while the fever reducer took effect. Ethan sat beside her bed watching color slowly return to her face and felt the terror gradually recede. His phone buzzed, a text from Victoria. How is she? Ethan stared at the message for a long moment before responding. Strep throat. They've started antibiotics. She's going to be fine. The response came immediately. Thank God. Take whatever time you need. We'll handle things here. Thank you. For everything. I don't know how to... You don't need to thank me. I'm just glad she's okay. Ethan pocketed his phone and looked at Mia, now sleeping peacefully as the medication worked. His daughter, his entire world. The thought of losing her, of facing that particular devastation again after Sarah. He couldn't finish the thought. They discharged Mia at 6 in the evening with prescriptions and instructions. Ethan carried her home in another cab, tucked her into bed with her favorite stuffed elephant, and sat beside her until she fell asleep. Only then did he let himself fall apart. He made it to the bathroom before the shaking started, before the tears came in great heaving sobs that he muffled against a towel so Mia wouldn't hear. 3 years of held grief, of terror, managed and pushed down and controlled, breaking through in waves. Sarah. The long, terrible months of her illness. The helplessness of watching someone you love suffer and being unable to fix it. The moment the doctor said there was nothing more they could do. The funeral. The aftermath. And now Mia, the only piece of Sarah he had left, burning with fever and limp in his arms. It had only been strep, common, treatable, nothing serious. But for those hours of not knowing, Ethan had stared into the abyss again, had felt the ground crumbling beneath him, had confronted the truth that he was one catastrophe away from complete destruction. Eventually, the tears stopped. He washed his face, checked on Mia again, and made himself eat something even though he had no appetite. He was exhausted, but knew sleep wouldn't come easily. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Victoria. I'm bringing dinner. You and Mia need to eat. Don't argue. Before Ethan could formulate a response, his building's intercom buzzed. He pressed the button, confused. It's Victoria, her voice came through the speaker. Let me up. Ethan's brain stuttered to a halt. Victoria Hale was at his apartment building, his CEO, at his modest Brooklyn walk-up at 7:30 on a Friday night. He buzzed her in on autopilot. 90 seconds later, she knocked softly on his door. Ethan opened it to find Victoria standing in his hallway, holding bags from what looked like an expensive restaurant. Her professional armor slightly cracked. She'd shed her jacket, and her hair was down from its usual severe style. May I come in? She asked quietly. Ethan stepped aside wordlessly. Victoria entered his small apartment with no visible judgment of the worn furniture, the crayon drawings taped to the walls, the general organized chaos of single-parent life. She set the bags on the kitchen counter and started unpacking containers. Chicken soup for Mia when she wakes up hungry, Victoria said. It's from a place that makes real chicken soup, not the canned stuff. And roasted chicken, vegetables, bread for you. You need to eat. You didn't have to do this, Ethan said, his voice rough from crying. I know. Victoria looked at him directly, and something in her expression made his breath catch. I wanted to. They stood in his small kitchen, the space between them charged with something neither acknowledged. Finally, Victoria spoke again. How are you? Really? The question, combined with the events of the day, demolished what was left of Ethan's composure. I was terrified, he admitted. I know it was probably nothing serious, but for those hours before I knew, I just kept thinking about Sarah. About losing someone I love and being powerless to stop it. About Mia growing up without either parent because I couldn't... His voice broke. Victoria moved without thinking, closing the distance between them and pulling him into an embrace. Ethan froze, shocked into stillness. Then something inside him cracked completely, and he leaned into her, accepting the comfort, The human contact, the simple kindness of being held. They stood like that for a long moment. Too long for boss and employee. Long enough to mean something. Victoria's hand moved slowly up and down his back, the gesture both soothing and devastating in its tenderness. "You're not alone," she said quietly against his shoulder. "You don't have to carry all of this by yourself." Ethan pulled back carefully, putting distance between them even as every cell in his body wanted to stay close. "I should check on Mia." "Of course." He stepped away and moved to Mia's room, using the moment to collect himself. His daughter slept peacefully, her breathing even, her forehead cooler to the touch. The antibiotics were already working. When he returned to the kitchen, Victoria had set out plates and was serving food with the efficiency of someone used to solving problems. "Sit," she commanded. "Eat." Ethan sat. Victoria sat across from him at his small table, and they ate in companionable silence. The food was excellent, and Ethan realized he was actually hungry despite everything. "Thank you," he said after several minutes. "For Dr. Newman, for the food, for coming here. You didn't have to do any of this. I wanted to make sure you were both okay." Victoria set down her fork, her gray eyes serious. "And I wanted to tell you something." Ethan's heart rate picked up. "Okay. What you said in my office last week about balance, about sacrifice, about learning together." Victoria took a breath. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. About you." The admission hung in the air between them, honest and terrifying. "Ms. Hale." "Victoria, please. When it's just us, call me Victoria." "Victoria," Ethan said carefully, testing the weight of her name. "I'm not sure we should. You're my boss, and there are power dynamics, and I don't want to do anything that would compromise." "I know," Victoria interrupted. "I know all the reasons this is complicated, inappropriate even. But I also know that I haven't connected with anyone the way I connect with you in longer than I can remember. And I don't think I'm imagining that it goes both ways." Ethan's hands gripped the edge of the table. "You're not imagining it. So what do we do?" The question was so direct, so honest, so completely Victoria. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "I have to think about Mia, about what's appropriate, what's sustainable. I can't afford to mess this up, the job, I mean. We need the stability. She needs the security." "I would never let your job be at risk because of anything personal between us," Victoria said firmly. "Never. And if you want to keep this purely professional, I will respect that completely. No retaliation, no awkwardness, I promise." Ethan believed her. That was the dangerous part. He actually believed her. "I need to be careful," he said slowly. "I need to protect Mia, but I also—" He met her eyes. "I haven't felt this way about anyone since Sarah, and that terrifies me." "It terrifies me too," Victoria admitted. "I've built my entire life around control, around knowing exactly what I'm doing and why. This feels like jumping off a cliff." "So we take it slow," Ethan said. "We're honest with each other. We figure out the professional boundaries and maintain them, and we see where this goes without rushing." Victoria nodded slowly. Slow, honest, careful. Very careful. A small sound from Mia's room made them both turn. Ethan rose quickly, moving to check on his daughter. She was stirring, her eyes opening. "Daddy, I'm thirsty." "I'll get you water, baby." He brought her water and sat with her while she drank, feeling her forehead again, definitely cooler. The crisis was passing. "I don't feel good," Mia said softly. "I know, sweetheart, but the medicine is helping. You're going to feel better soon. Can you stay with me?" "Of course." Ethan lay down beside Mia on her small bed, and she curled into him like she had when she was tiny. Within minutes, she was asleep again. He stayed there for 20 minutes, feeling her breathe, reminding himself that she was okay. Everything was okay. When he returned to the kitchen, Victoria had cleaned up the dinner dishes and was standing by the window, looking out at the Brooklyn street below. "She okay?" Victoria asked without turning. "Sleeping. Fever's down. She's going to be fine." "Good." Victoria turned to face him. "I should go. Let you both rest. Thank you. For everything today. I mean it." Victoria moved to the door, then paused with her hand on the knob. "Ethan?" "Yes?" "I meant what I said about not being alone. About this, whatever this is between us, we'll figure it out together. Then she was gone, leaving Ethan standing in his quiet apartment with his heart pounding and his world tilted on its axis. Mia recovered quickly, exactly as Dr. Kim had predicted. By Sunday, she was begging to go to the park. By Monday, she was back to school, chattering about her friend Emma and a science project about butterflies. Ethan returned to work Tuesday feeling simultaneously grounded and unmoored. The crisis had passed. His daughter was healthy. Life was returning to normal, except nothing felt normal anymore. He saw Victoria in the hallway Tuesday afternoon. Their eyes met briefly, and she smiled, small, private, meant only for him. Then she continued to her meeting, and Ethan continued to his, and anyone watching would have seen nothing more than professional colleagues acknowledging each other. But Ethan felt that smile all the way to his bones. The working group continued meeting weekly. Ethan contributed his observations and suggestions. Victoria facilitated with her usual precision. They maintained perfect professional boundaries in front of others, no hint of anything personal. But sometimes their hands would brush reaching for the same document. Sometimes their eyes would meet across the table and hold for a second too long. Sometimes Victoria would ask a question that seemed designed specifically to hear Ethan's perspective. Small things, careful things, building towards something neither fully acknowledged. 3 weeks after Mia's illness, Ethan stayed late working on the client project. It was nearly 8 when he finally packed his laptop, rubbing his tired eyes. The office was mostly empty, cleaning crew making their rounds. Ethan was heading to the elevator when he noticed light coming from Victoria's office. He stood in the hallway, debating. Professional boundaries said he should just go home. Everything else said he should check on her. Everything else won. He knocked softly on her doorframe. Victoria looked up from her computer, surprise flickering across her face. "Working late?" she asked. "Could say the same about you." "I'm always working late," Victoria said with a slight smile. "It's basically my default state." Ethan stepped into her office uninvited, drawn by something he couldn't name. "When was the last time you went home before 8? Victoria thought about it. "Thursday." 3 days ago. "I suppose." Victoria. Ethan used her first name deliberately, watching her reaction. "When was the last time you did something that wasn't work?" She leaned back in her chair, studying him. "Is this concern for my well-being, Mr. Moore?" "Yes," he said simply. "Because you take care of everyone else. Someone should take care of you." Something vulnerable passed across Victoria's face. "I don't need... Everyone needs..." Ethan interrupted gently. "That's what you taught me. When you showed up at my apartment with dinner, when you made sure Mia got the best care. You demonstrated that accepting help isn't weakness. So let me return the favor." "What did you have in mind?" Ethan made the decision in the moment, reckless and careful at once. "Have dinner with me. Not work dinner, not business, just dinner." Victoria's eyes widened slightly. "That sounds like a date." "It is a date," Ethan confirmed. "If you want it to be. But we do it carefully, somewhere quiet, private. We're just 2 people having dinner. 2 people who work together. 2 people who care about each other," Ethan countered. "Who are trying to figure out how to navigate something complicated while being honest and respectful. If you want to say no, that's okay, but I hope you won't." Victoria stood, moving around her desk until she was close enough that he could see the flecks of blue in her gray eyes. "Saturday," she said quietly. "There's a small Italian place in the West Village. Quiet, discreet, 7:30. I'll need to arrange childcare for Mia." "Of course, let me know if Saturday doesn't work." "Saturday works," Ethan said, his heart racing. "It's a date." Victoria smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "It's a date." Ethan left her office feeling like he was walking on air, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. He'd just asked his CEO on a date. She'd said yes. They were doing this, whatever this was. Careful, he reminded himself, slow and careful. But as he rode the subway home, watching the city lights blur past, Ethan couldn't suppress the smile that kept breaking across his face. For the first time in 3 years, he was looking forward to something that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with possibility. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. The days between Tuesday and Saturday stretched and compressed simultaneously. Ethan moved through work with heightened awareness, conscious of Victoria's presence in the building even when he couldn't see her. Every email exchange felt weighted with subtext. Every accidental hallway encounter made his pulse quicken. On Thursday, Marcus called him into his office with an expression Ethan couldn't read. "Close the door," Marcus said, and Ethan's stomach tightened with familiar anxiety. "Is something wrong with the client project?" Ethan asked, running through recent deliverables in his mind. "The client project is excellent. Better than excellent, actually. Sarah Chen called me yesterday to say you're the best consultant they've worked with." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying Ethan with an intensity that felt searching. "That's not why I wanted to talk to you." Ethan's mouth went dry. Did Marcus know about the dinner plans? Had someone seen them in Victoria's office? Was this the conversation about professional boundaries and inappropriate relationships? "I wanted to give you some advice," Marcus continued. "You've been here almost 3 months now, and you've made quite an impression, not just on me or the team, but at the executive level. Victoria speaks highly of your work in strategy sessions. That's rare. She doesn't give praise lightly." "I appreciate that," Ethan said carefully, unsure where this was heading. "Here's the thing about working closely with executives, especially someone like Victoria." Marcus chose his words with visible care. "She's brilliant, demanding, and intensely focused on the work. But she's also human, even if she sometimes forgets that. People who work directly with her tend to fall into two camps: those who are intimidated into paralysis, and those who mistake professional respect for something more personal." The statement hung in the air like a warning flare. Ethan kept his expression neutral. "I'm not sure I follow." "I'm saying be careful," Marcus said, not unkindly. "Victoria has been my friend for 12 years. I've watched her build this company by sacrificing everything else in her life. She doesn't have hobbies, doesn't have close relationships outside of work, doesn't let anyone see past the professional armor. It makes her effective, but it also makes her isolated." He paused. "And sometimes, when someone finally does see past that armor, it can create complicated situations." "Are you telling me to keep my distance?" Ethan asked, trying to keep defensiveness out of his voice. "I'm telling you to be thoughtful. About your career, about her position, about the potential complications." Marcus's tone softened. "I like you, Ethan. You're talented, you're honest, and you genuinely care about doing good work. I don't want to see you get hurt, professionally or personally. And I don't want to see Victoria get hurt either." Ethan met Marcus's eyes directly. "I have no intention of hurting anyone, especially not Victoria." Something flickered across Marcus's face. Surprise, maybe, or confirmation of a suspicion. "Good. Just remember that in this building, perception matters almost as much as reality. Be smart." The conversation stayed with Ethan for the rest of the day. Marcus clearly suspected something, even if he didn't know specifics, which meant others might suspect too, which meant he and Victoria needed to be even more careful than they'd planned. That evening, he talked to Mia about Saturday while they made dinner together. "I have a work dinner on Saturday night," he said, measuring pasta into boiling water. "Mrs. Chen is going to stay with you. Is that okay?" Mia looked up from the vegetables she was washing, her expression curious. "A work dinner, like with your boss?" "Sort of," Ethan hedged. "It's important for my job." "Oh, will you be home to read to me before bed?" "Probably not, baby, but I'll read you 2 chapters on Sunday to make up for it." Mia considered this seriously, then nodded. "Okay, but you have to promise." "I promise." Ethan kissed the top of her head, breathing in strawberry shampoo and the simple comfort of his daughter's presence. "Daddy?" Mia said after a moment. "You seem different lately." Ethan's hand stilled on the colander. "Different how?" "Happier, like the happy goes all the way through instead of just being on the outside." The observation hit him with unexpected force. Out of the mouths of babes, he thought again. His 6-year-old daughter had identified something he'd barely acknowledged to himself. "You know what?" he said, kneeling beside her. "I think you're right. I am happier. This job has been really good for us." "Is it just the job?" Mia asked, and her perceptiveness was almost unsettling. "Mostly," Ethan said, which wasn't quite a lie. Why do you ask? Mia shrugged with the elaborate casualness of a child trying to seem nonchalant. You just seem like how you used to be, before Mommy got sick. I like it. Ethan pulled her into a tight hug, fighting the perpetual ache of grief mixed now with something lighter. Hope, maybe. Or the possibility of building something new without betraying what he'd lost. I like it too, he whispered into her hair. Saturday arrived with crystalline autumn clarity, the kind of October day that made New York feel like the center of the universe. Ethan spent the morning with Mia at the park, pushing her on swings and helping her collect leaves for a school project. They had lunch at their favorite diner, splitting a grilled cheese and chocolate milkshake like they always did. Normal, beautiful, grounding. At 5, Mrs. Chen arrived with her knitting and a kind smile. Mia hugged Ethan goodbye without fuss, already asking Mrs. Chen if they could make cookies. Ethan stood in front of his closet feeling like a teenager before prom. He'd bought a new shirt on Friday. Nothing expensive, but nicer than his usual rotation. Dark blue, well-fitted, appropriate for a nice dinner without being pretentious. He dressed carefully, checking his reflection multiple times. Hair acceptable, tie straight, shoes polished. He looked like a man preparing for something important, and the flutter in his stomach confirmed it. The Italian restaurant Victoria had chosen was tucked into a quiet West Village side street, the kind of place you'd walk past without noticing unless you knew to look for it. Ethan arrived at 7:25, gave his name to the hostess, and was led to a corner table partially screened by a bookshelf of wine bottles. Private, discreet, perfect. Victoria arrived exactly at 7:30, and Ethan's breath caught despite being prepared for her. She wore a deep green dress that fell just below her knees, elegant without being formal. Her dark hair was loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back, softening the angles of her face. Without the armor of a business suit, she looked younger, more vulnerable, more real. "Hi," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Hi," Ethan replied, and for a moment they just looked at each other, acknowledging the strangeness and rightness of being here together. The waiter appeared with menus and water, reciting specials with practiced efficiency. They ordered wine, a Sangiovese that Victoria recommended, and the waiter disappeared, leaving them in their screened corner with the low murmur of other diners providing cover. "So," Victoria said, a slight smile playing at her lips, "this is unusual." "Completely unusual," Ethan agreed. "Also possibly inadvisable, potentially complicated, and definitely outside any professional boundary I've ever maintained." "Should we leave?" Victoria asked, but she was smiling fully now. "Absolutely not." They laughed together, and something tight in Ethan's chest loosened. This could work. They could do this. The wine arrived, and they ordered food, homemade pasta for Victoria, chicken piccata for Ethan. Then they were alone again, and the weight of everything unspoken settled between them. "I'm nervous," Victoria admitted quietly. "I'm never nervous. I negotiate million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but sitting here with you, I'm actually nervous." "That makes 2 of us," Ethan said. "I keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. The power dynamics, the professional complications, what it means for my job security if things don't work out. And yet, here you are. Here I am." Ethan took a sip of wine, gathering courage. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why me? You're Victoria Hale. You could have anyone. So why a single father who's been at your company for 3 months and brings approximately 0 sophistication to this situation?" Victoria set down her wine glass, her expression turning serious. "Do you want the honest answer?" "Always." "Because you see me," she said simply. "Not Victoria Hale, CEO, not the woman in the business magazines, just me. When you looked at me in that boardroom on the day of your interview, when you told me I was doing better at balance than I realized, you saw the person, not the position." She paused. "Do you have any idea how rare that is? How isolating it is to be surrounded by people who only see your title?" Ethan thought about Marcus's warning, about Victoria's isolation, about the cost of building an empire alone. "I think I'm starting to understand," he said, "but I also need you to understand something. I'm not sophisticated or polished. I'm a single dad who sometimes serves cereal for dinner and has crayon drawings taped to his walls. My life is complicated in very mundane ways. If this goes anywhere, you're not just getting me. You're getting a package deal that includes a 6-year-old with strong opinions about bedtime and a tendency to ask questions at the worst possible moments. Victoria's smile was soft, genuine. I like that your daughter asks questions. I like that you serve cereal for dinner sometimes. I like that your life has texture and mess and reality. My life is all clean lines and control. Maybe that's part of what draws me to you. You're real in a way I've forgotten how to be. The food arrived, interrupting the moment. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. Victoria told him about building the company, about the early years of 18-hour days and sleeping on her office couch. Ethan told her about Sarah, about the grief and the rebuilding and learning to be a single parent. "Do you still love her?" Victoria asked. And there was no jealousy in the question, just genuine curiosity. "Always," Ethan said honestly. "But it's different now, less sharp, more like a permanent background ache instead of acute pain. I'll never stop loving her, but I'm also learning that loving her doesn't mean I can't move forward." That's brave. It's survival, and maybe hope. Ethan met her eyes. "What about you? You've never mentioned anyone." Victoria looked down at her pasta. "There have been people, relationships, if you can call them that, but they always ended the same way. I chose work, and they left. Eventually I stopped trying. Easier to just accept that I'm not built for partnership." "Or you haven't met someone who understands that your work matters to you," Ethan suggested. "Someone who doesn't see your dedication as competition." "Is that what you are?" Victoria asked softly. "Someone who understands?" "I'm trying to be," Ethan said. "I understand ambition. I understand loving what you do. I also understand that there has to be more than just work, or we end up hollowed out." He reached across the table, letting his fingers brush hers. "I think we could help each other find that balance." Victoria turned her hand over, letting their fingers intertwine. The touch was electric, intimate in a way that went beyond physical contact. "I'm scared," she admitted, "of messing this up, of hurting you, of this affecting your career, of all of it." "Me too. But I think maybe scared means it matters." They finished dinner talking about safer topics, books, favorite neighborhoods in the city, childhood memories. Victoria had grown up in Connecticut, daughter of 2 academics who'd expected her to pursue literature or philosophy. Business had been an act of rebellion. "They still don't quite understand what I do," she said with wry affection. "My mother keeps asking when I'm going to write something meaningful. Building a company that employs hundreds of people and helps other businesses succeed seems pretty meaningful," Ethan observed. "Try telling her that." When the check came, there was a brief negotiation about who would pay. Victoria won by virtue of having her credit card already in hand. "Next time," Ethan insisted. "Next time," she agreed, and the confirmation that there would be a next time sent warmth through him. They left the restaurant together, stepping out into the cool October evening. The streets of the West Village were quiet, couples strolling hand in hand, restaurants glowing with warm light. "I should get home to Mia," Ethan said, though he didn't want the evening to end. "Of course." Victoria didn't move away, standing close enough that he could smell her perfume, the same cedar and sandalwood from the interview. "Victoria," Ethan said quietly, "I know we're taking this slow, being careful, but I need to be honest about something." "What?" "I really want to kiss you right now." Her breath caught audibly. They stood on the sidewalk, people flowing around them, the city alive with Saturday night energy. "That would definitely complicate things," Victoria said, but she hadn't stepped back. "I know. We said slow." "We did. Professional boundaries. Very important." Neither of them moved. The space between them felt charged with possibility and restraint in equal measure. Finally, Victoria smiled ruefully. "Not tonight, but soon, when we've figured out how to do this without destroying everything we're both trying to protect." "Soon," Ethan agreed, though the word felt both like promise and torture. He walked her to the corner where she could catch a cab. Before she got in, she turned back to him. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me, for tonight, for being patient with how complicated this is." Thank you for taking a chance on me, Ethan replied. In the interview, and now. The cab pulled away and Ethan stood on the corner watching taillights disappear into traffic. Then he headed to the subway, his heart full of something he hadn't felt in years. Possibility. Sunday morning, Mia climbed into bed with him at 7, demanding the promised 2 chapters. They read together about a girl who discovered a magical library where books came to life, and Ethan found himself thinking about how his own life felt a bit like a story he hadn't realized he was in. Was your work dinner good? Mia asked when they finished the 2nd chapter. Very good, Ethan said. We talked about important things. Like what? Ethan thought about how to explain complexity to a 6-year-old. Like how to balance working hard with making sure you have time for the people who matter, like being brave enough to try new things even when they're scary. Mia nodded solemnly. That does sound important. They spent Sunday doing normal things, grocery shopping, laundry, a trip to the library. Ordinary life, grounding, and precious. Ethan held on to it deliberately, reminding himself that whatever happened with Victoria, this was his foundation. Mia, their small world, the life they'd built together. Monday at work felt different. Ethan moved through his tasks with new awareness, hyper-conscious of Victoria's presence in the building. They didn't cross paths until the afternoon, when he was presenting to the working group about implementation timelines. Victoria sat at the end of the table, professional and focused, asking sharp questions that pushed his analysis deeper. To anyone watching, it was pure business. But when their eyes met briefly across the conference room, Ethan saw the hint of a smile, the warmth beneath the professional mask. After the meeting, as people filed out, Victoria caught his elbow gently. Good presentation, she said quietly, for his ears only. And good Saturday. Very good Saturday, he agreed, keeping his voice equally low. Then she was gone, and Ethan was left with the pleasant turbulence of wanting more while knowing they needed to be careful. The week progressed with mounting tension. Not bad tension, but the electric awareness of something building. Every professional interaction carried undertones. Every email could be read 2 ways. Every accidental encounter felt weighted with significance. On Wednesday, Victoria sent a meeting invitation. Subject line, strategic discussion. Time, 6:30 in the evening. Location, her office. Ethan accepted the invitation with his pulse racing, then spent the rest of the day oscillating between anticipation and anxiety. Strategic discussion could mean actual strategy, or it could mean something else entirely. At 6:30, he knocked on her door. Come in, Victoria called. Her office was dim, only the desk lamp providing light against the twilight cityscape beyond the windows. Victoria stood by the window, silhouetted against the city lights, and for a moment Ethan just looked at her. Close the door, she said. He closed it. I've been thinking, Victoria continued, still facing the window, about boundaries, about being careful, about taking things slow. And? Ethan's voice came out rougher than intended. Victoria turned to face him, and her expression made his breath stop. And I think I've been overthinking it. Yes, we need to be professional at work. Yes, we need to be careful about perception. But I also think I've spent too much of my life being careful and not enough of it actually living. She crossed the office until she stood directly in front of him, close enough to touch. I'm not good at this, she admitted. At being vulnerable. At admitting I want something beyond work. But I want this. I want to see where this goes. And I'm tired of pretending Saturday didn't change everything. Ethan reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture echoed the one she'd made in his apartment, touch transformed into connection. What are you suggesting? He asked. I'm suggesting we stop waiting for the perfect moment and just be honest about what this is. Victoria's voice was steady despite the vulnerability in her eyes. I'm suggesting we acknowledge that this is more than professional respect and see where it leads, carefully, thoughtfully, but actually moving forward instead of circling. What about the complications? Ethan asked, even as his hand lingered near her face. Marcus already suspects something. If people find out, then we handle it, Victoria interrupted. Together. I'm not going to let workplace politics dictate my personal life. And I'm certainly not going to let fear keep me from someone who makes me feel actually human for the first time in years. Ethan's hand moved to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "You're sure about this?" "I'm terrified," Victoria said honestly. "But yes, I'm sure." Ethan leaned in slowly, watching her eyes for any hint of hesitation. He found none. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and electric simultaneously, weeks of building tension releasing in a single moment of connection. Victoria's hands came up to his chest, fingers curling into his shirt. Ethan's other hand found the small of her back, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, and for a handful of heartbeats, nothing existed beyond this moment. No complications, no workplace dynamics, no fear of consequences. Just two people who'd found each other against all odds, choosing to be brave enough to try. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing slightly unsteadily, Victoria laughed softly. "Well," she said, "that definitely happened." "Any regrets?" Ethan asked. "Not even close." They stood together in the dimming office, the city lights beginning to sparkle below, and Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him in the best possible way. This was real. This was happening. And instead of terrifying him, it filled him with something he'd almost forgotten existed. Joy. "We should probably figure out the logistics," Victoria said practically, though she hadn't stepped out of his arms. "How we handle this professionally, what we tell people, if anything." "Right now?" Ethan asked, smiling. "Eventually," she conceded. "But maybe not right this second." She kissed him again, and Ethan let himself get lost in it. Time enough for logistics and complications later. Right now, in this moment, he was just a man kissing a woman he cared about deeply, and that was enough. Eventually, reality reasserted itself. Ethan needed to get home to Mia. Victoria had a conference call with a West Coast client at 8. They separated reluctantly, straightening clothes and hair, trying to look like colleagues who'd had a strategic discussion rather than a romantic moment. "Tomorrow," Victoria said, her hand lingering on his arm. "We'll figure out the next steps tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Ethan agreed. He left her office feeling like he was floating. The elevator ride down felt surreal. The subway ride home passed in a pleasant haze. When he got home, Mrs. Chen took one look at his face and smiled knowingly. "Good meeting?" she asked. "Very productive," Ethan replied, and couldn't suppress his grin. That night, after Mia was asleep, he sat in the dark living room and let himself process everything. He was dating his boss, dating Victoria Hale. The situation was complicated and potentially fraught with professional peril, but it was also real and honest and mutual. And for the first time in 3 years, Ethan felt like he was actually building a future instead of just surviving. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Still no regrets, sleep well." Ethan smiled into the darkness and typed back. "None. Sweet dreams." The complications would come. The logistics would need to be addressed. They'd have to navigate workplace politics and personal boundaries and all the messy reality of blending two complicated lives. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, Ethan Moore went to sleep with possibility blooming in his chest and the memory of Victoria's kiss warming him more than any blanket could. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Tonight, he let himself simply be happy. The following morning arrived with the sharp clarity that follows a momentous decision. Ethan woke earlier than usual, his mind already racing through implications and possibilities. In the kitchen, making coffee while dawn light filtered through the windows, he forced himself to think practically about what came next. They needed ground rules, clear boundaries between professional and personal, a plan for how to handle the inevitable moment when someone at the office figured out what was happening between them. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria, sent at 6:15 in the morning. "Coffee before work? There's a place 2 blocks from your subway stop, neutral territory." Ethan smiled at her practical approach to romance and texted back an address and time. They met at 7:30 at a small cafe that catered to the early morning crowd. Construction workers, nurses ending night shifts, parents grabbing coffee before school drop-off. Ethan spotted Victoria at a corner table dressed for work, but with her hair still slightly damp from a recent shower. She looked softer than she did in the office, more approachable. "Hi," she said as he slid into the seat across from her. "Hi." Ethan accepted the coffee she'd already ordered for him, black, the way she'd noticed he took it. This feels very spy movie. Secret morning meetings. Victoria's lips quirked. I thought we should talk before we're both in the office. Establish some parameters. I had the same thought, Ethan admitted. We need to be smart about this. They spent the next 40 minutes mapping out boundaries with the same strategic thinking they'd bring to a business challenge. At work, they would maintain professional distance. No different treatment than any other employee. No private meetings that couldn't be justified by legitimate business needs. Outside of work, they would be cautious about public places where colleagues might see them. And they agreed to be honest with each other about concerns as they arose. What about Mia? Victoria asked, her voice careful. When do I meet her? Do you want to wait until we're sure this is going somewhere? The question touched something tender in Ethan's chest. I need to be careful about bringing people into her life. She's already lost her mother. I can't introduce her to someone who might not stay. I understand, Victoria said, and there was no hurt in her voice, just acceptance. Tell me when you're ready. I'll wait. Thank you. Ethan reached across the table, letting his fingers brush hers briefly. For understanding that she comes first. She should come first, Victoria said simply. That's what makes you a good father. They separated outside the cafe, heading to work on different subway lines. Ethan spent the commute thinking about how natural it had felt, planning with Victoria, how easily they communicated, how aligned their values seemed to be despite their different backgrounds. The next 2 weeks fell into a rhythm that was both exhilarating and challenging. At work, they maintained perfect professionalism. Ethan continued to excel on his projects, earning praise from clients and respect from colleagues. Victoria ran the company with her usual fierce competence. When their paths crossed in meetings or hallways, they were cordial, appropriate, unremarkable. But after hours, they carved out moments together. Dinner at quiet restaurants far from the office. A walk through Central Park on a Sunday afternoon while Mia was at a birthday party. Long phone conversations after Mia was asleep, talking about everything and nothing. Ethan learned that Victoria was funnier than her professional persona suggested, that she had strong opinions about architecture and a secret love of old movies. She learned that he could cook surprisingly well when he had time, that he missed playing guitar but hadn't touched one since Sarah died, that he worried constantly about being enough for Mia. It was the getting to know you phase of any relationship, complicated by the need for discretion and the weight of their professional connection. 3 weeks after their first kiss, the delicate balance shattered. Ethan was in a client meeting when his phone rang. He glanced down, saw Mia's school number, and felt his stomach drop. He excused himself immediately and stepped into the hallway. Mr. Moore, this is Principal Davis at Mia's school. There's been an incident. Mia's fine, but we need you to come pick her up. What kind of incident? Ethan asked, already moving toward the elevator. She got into an altercation with another student, physical. We have a zero-tolerance policy for fighting. I need you to come get her, and we'll need to discuss consequences. Ethan's mind reeled. Mia had never been in a fight. She was gentle, conflict-averse, the child who cried when other kids argued. I'm on my way, he said. He texted Rachel that he had a family emergency and would need to reschedule the afternoon's meetings, then practically ran to the subway. The ride to Brooklyn felt interminable. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Everything okay? Rachel said you had an emergency. Mia got in a fight at school. I have to pick her up. A fight? That doesn't sound like her from what you've told me. It doesn't. I don't know what happened. Call me later. I'm here if you need anything. Ethan pocketed his phone and tried to control his racing thoughts. Fighting. Zero tolerance. What if she got suspended? What if there was something happening at school he hadn't noticed because he'd been so focused on work and Victoria? Guilt crashed over him in waves. The school secretary directed him to the principal's office, where he found Mia sitting in a chair that was too big for her, tear tracks on her face, her right hand wrapped in an ice pack. Mia. Ethan dropped to his knees in front of her. Are you hurt? My hand hurts, she said in a small voice. I punched Tommy. Principal Davis, a stern woman in her 50s, gestured for Ethan to take a seat. Mr. Moore, thank you for coming so quickly. I understand this is out of character for Mia. She's normally one of our best-behaved students. What happened? Ethan asked, keeping one hand on Mia's shoulder. From what we've gathered from witnesses, Tommy Martinez made some unkind comments about Mia's mother. Specifically, he said that Mia didn't have a real family because her mother was dead, and it was just her and her dad. Principal Davis's expression softened slightly. Mia asked him to stop. He continued. She punched him in the shoulder. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. His daughter had been defending her family, defending Sarah's memory, defending the life they'd built together. "I see," he said carefully. "I understand the provocation," Principal Davis continued. "And Tommy will be facing consequences for his cruel words. But we have a strict no-violence policy. Mia will be suspended for the remainder of the week. 3 days." "I understand," Ethan said, though he wanted to argue that his daughter had been pushed to her limit by cruelty. He signed the necessary paperwork and led Mia out of the building, his mind already rearranging his work schedule. 3 days at home. He'd need to work remotely, reschedule client meetings, find a way to balance everything. In the cab home, Mia started crying in earnest. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I know I shouldn't have hit him, but he said mean things about Mommy, and he wouldn't stop, and I just got so mad." Ethan pulled her close. "I know, baby. I understand why you did it. But violence isn't the answer, even when people are cruel. Are you mad at me?" "No," Ethan said honestly. "I'm sad that someone said things that hurt you. I'm sad that you felt like hitting was your only option, but I'm not mad." At home, he settled Mia on the couch with her favorite blanket and made her hot chocolate. Then he called Marcus. "I need to work remotely for the rest of the week," he explained. "Mia's been suspended from school, and I don't have childcare arranged." "Is she okay?" Marcus asked, concern evident. "She will be. It's complicated, but I can handle everything from home. All my meetings can be virtual, and I'll be available during normal work hours." "Do what you need to do," Marcus said. "Family first." After he hung up, Ethan texted Victoria with a brief explanation. Her response came immediately. "Can I come over after work? I'd like to help if I can." Ethan stared at the text for a long moment. Victoria coming to his apartment would cross a line they'd been carefully maintaining, keeping their personal relationship separate from his life with Mia. But he was exhausted and overwhelmed, and the thought of facing this alone felt crushing. "Are you sure?" he texted back. "Completely sure. I'll bring dinner. See you at 6:30. Ethan spent the afternoon working on his laptop while Mia colored quietly beside him, unusually subdued. He could tell she was processing, working through the emotions that had led to the fight. Around 4, she finally spoke. "Daddy, do you think Mommy would be mad at me for hitting Tommy?" The question broke Ethan's heart. "I think Mommy would understand why you were upset, but I also think she'd tell you the same thing I'm telling you, that hitting isn't the right way to handle mean words, even when they hurt a lot." Mia nodded seriously. "I miss her." "Me too, baby. Every single day." They sat together on the couch, Mia curled against his side, and Ethan felt the familiar ache of grief mixed with gratitude that he still had his daughter, that they had each other. At 6:30, the intercom buzzed. Ethan pressed the button and Victoria's voice came through. "It's me. I have Thai food and ice cream." Mia looked up, confused. "Who's that?" "A friend from work," Ethan said carefully. "She wanted to bring us dinner. Is that okay?" Mia shrugged, her usual curiosity dampened by the day's events. Ethan opened the door to find Victoria in jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, carrying multiple bags of takeout. She looked younger like this, less intimidating, more approachable. "Hi," she said, stepping inside. Then she spotted Mia on the couch and her expression softened. "You must be Mia. I'm Victoria. It's really nice to meet you." Mia studied Victoria with the frank assessment of a 6-year-old. "Are you my dad's boss?" "I am," Victoria said, setting the food on the kitchen counter. "But right now I'm just someone who wanted to make sure you both had a good dinner after a hard day." "We had a very hard day," Mia confirmed solemnly. Victoria knelt down so she was at Mia's eye level, her movements careful and respectful. "I heard. That sounds really tough. Sometimes people say mean things, and it makes us feel awful inside." "He said I don't have a real family," Mia said, her voice wobbling. "But I do. I have Daddy and Mrs. Chen and my friend Emma and my mommy, even though she's not here anymore. That's a family." That's absolutely a family, Victoria agreed gently. And anyone who says different doesn't understand what family really means. Family is about people who love you and take care of you. It has nothing to do with who's here or not here. Mia seemed to consider this, then nodded. I like you. You're nice. Victoria smiled, and Ethan saw genuine warmth in it. I like you too. Now, I brought pad thai and spring rolls and mango sticky rice for dessert. Does that sound good? They ate dinner together at Ethan's small kitchen table, and he watched Victoria interact with his daughter with a naturalness he hadn't expected. She asked Mia about school, the good parts, not the fight, and listened with the same focused attention she brought to business meetings. She told a funny story about her own childhood fight with a neighbor boy who'd said girls couldn't climb trees. What happened? Mia asked, invested in the story. I climbed higher than he ever had and proved him wrong, Victoria said. But I also scraped my knee pretty badly and my mother grounded me for a week. So the moral of the story is that sometimes proving people wrong feels good in the moment but has consequences. Mia absorbed this wisdom seriously. After dinner, while Ethan cleaned up, Victoria and Mia sat on the couch looking at a photo album Mia had pulled out. Ethan could hear them talking softly, Mia pointing out pictures of Sarah, telling stories about her mother. Victoria listened without discomfort, asking gentle questions, honoring Sarah's memory without trying to replace her or diminish her importance. Watching them together, something in Ethan's chest cracked open. This was what he'd been afraid of, bringing someone into Mia's life, risking attachment and potential loss. But seeing Victoria's genuine care, her respect for their history, her gentle approach to his daughter's grief, he realized that the risk might be worth taking. At 7:30, Ethan announced it was time for Mia's bath. Victoria took that as her cue to leave. Thank you for dinner, she said at the door, speaking quietly. And for letting me meet her. She's wonderful, Ethan. You're doing an amazing job. Thank you for being so good with her, Ethan replied. I wasn't sure how this would go. I meant what I said. She's a real family, and you're building something beautiful together. Victoria hesitated, then added, I'd like to be part of that if you'll let me. Not replacing anyone, just adding, if that's something you both want. Ethan kissed her softly, mindful that Mia could appear at any moment. I want that. I think Mia might too, given time. After Victoria left, Ethan helped Mia with her bath and got her ready for bed. As he tucked her in, she looked up at him with serious eyes. Is Victoria your girlfriend? She asked. Ethan had known this conversation was coming, but he still felt unprepared. Yes, he said honestly. She is. How do you feel about that? Mia thought about it, her face scrunched in concentration. I think it's okay. She's nice, and she didn't act weird about Mommy. Will she come over more? Would you like her to? Maybe sometimes, Mia said carefully. Not all the time. I still want time that's just us. Always, Ethan promised. There will always be time that's just us. Victoria understands that. Okay then, Mia said, satisfied. Can we read 2 chapters tonight since I had a bad day? Absolutely. They read about the magical library, and Mia fell asleep halfway through the 2nd chapter. Ethan stayed beside her for a while, watching her breathe, feeling grateful and terrified in equal measure. He was building something new, not replacing what he'd lost, but adding to what remained. And maybe that was okay. The next morning, Ethan was making breakfast when his phone rang. Marcus. Morning, Ethan answered, juggling the phone while flipping pancakes. We have a situation, Marcus said without preamble. The Reynolds project hit a critical snag. Sarah Chen is threatening to pull the contract unless we can resolve it immediately. I know you're out this week, but you're the one who built the relationship with their operations team. Any chance you can join a video call at 10? Ethan glanced at Mia, who was setting the table with exaggerated care. Yeah, I can do that. Send me the details. He spent the morning working with Mia, playing quietly nearby. At 10, he joined the video call and spent 90 minutes navigating client frustrations, pulling in information from his extensive stakeholder relationships, and proposing solutions that address the root issues rather than symptoms. Sarah Chen's expression gradually shifted from angry to thoughtful to satisfied. This is exactly why we work with you, Ethan, she said at the end. You actually understand our business. Send me the revised timeline and we're good. After the call ended, Marcus sent a private message. You just saved $1 million contract from your kitchen table. Victoria asked me to tell you that was exceptional work. Ethan smiled at the message, then at Mia, who'd been remarkably patient. Want to go to the park? He asked. I think we both need some fresh air. They spent the afternoon at the playground, Mia gradually returning to her normal, cheerful self. Other parents were there with their children, and Ethan noticed a few curious glances, clearly wondering why he wasn't at work on a Wednesday afternoon. He didn't care. Let them wonder. His daughter needed him, and he was exactly where he should be. That evening, after Mia was asleep, Victoria called. Marcus told me about the Reynolds call, she said. That was impressive crisis management. Just doing my job, Ethan replied, settling onto his couch. From home, while managing a suspended 6-year-old and probably feeling terrible about the whole situation. Don't minimize it. Victoria paused. How is she doing? Better. We talked a lot today about handling difficult situations without violence. I think she understands. And how are you doing? The question, asked with genuine care, made Ethan's throat tight. Honestly, I'm tired. I'm worried I'm not doing enough, that I'm failing her by working so much, that meeting you was selfish timing when I should be focused entirely on her. Stop, Victoria interrupted gently. You're not failing her. You're providing for her, which requires working. You're being present when she needs you, like today. And you're also allowed to have a life beyond being a parent. You're allowed to want companionship and connection. Those things don't make you selfish, they make you human. Sometimes I feel like I'm trying to be too many things at once, Ethan admitted. Good father, competent employee, partner to you. What if I'm not enough for any of it? What if you're exactly enough? Victoria countered. What if the fact that you care so much about doing right by everyone is exactly what makes you good at all of it? They talked for another hour, and Ethan felt the weight on his chest gradually lighten. By the time they said goodnight, he felt steadier, more grounded. The rest of the week passed quietly. Ethan worked remotely, fielding calls and emails while Mia recovered from her suspension. They fell into an easy rhythm, work in the mornings, activities in the afternoons, reading and quiet time in the evenings. Victoria came by one more time, bringing groceries and staying for dinner. She and Mia worked on a puzzle together while Ethan cooked, and he watched them gradually grow comfortable with each other. On Friday evening, after Mia was asleep, Victoria stayed. They sat on the couch, Ethan's arm around her shoulders, and talked about the week. I keep waiting for this to feel wrong, Ethan admitted. You being here, in my life, in Mia's life. But it doesn't. It feels right in a way I wasn't sure I'd feel again after Sarah. Does that scare you? Victoria asked. Terrifies me, Ethan said honestly, because if I let myself fully believe this is real, then I have something else I could lose, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to survive that kind of loss again. Victoria shifted so she could look at him directly. I can't promise you won't lose me. Life doesn't come with those guarantees, but I can promise that I'm here right now, fully committed to figuring this out with you. And I can promise that I see what you're building with Mia, and I respect it completely. I don't want to disrupt it. I want to support it. What if people at work find out and it creates problems? Ethan asked, voicing the fear he'd been carrying. What if it affects my job or your reputation or... Then we handle it, Victoria said firmly. Together. Ethan, I've spent 15 years building a company and a reputation. I'm not throwing that away recklessly, but I'm also not going to let fear dictate my personal life anymore. If we handle this with integrity and professionalism, we can navigate whatever comes. Ethan kissed her, pouring everything he couldn't say into the contact. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Victoria smiled. I should go, she said reluctantly. But I'll see you Monday, back in the office. Back to being professional and appropriate, Ethan agreed. Exactly. Victoria stood, gathering her things. At the door, she turned back. Ethan, thank you for letting me in. Into your home, your life, Mia's world. I don't take that lightly. I know, Ethan said. That's why I trust you with it. Monday morning, Ethan returned to the office feeling both grounded and energized. The week at home had given him perspective. His job was important, but it wasn't everything. Mia was his priority, always. And Victoria was becoming someone important to both of them. threading herself into their lives with care and respect. The day proceeded normally until 3 in the afternoon, when Marcus appeared at Ethan's desk with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. "My office," Marcus said. "Now." Ethan's stomach dropped. He followed Marcus to his office, his mind racing through possibilities. Had someone seen him with Victoria? Was this about the week he'd worked remotely? Had he made a mistake on the Reynolds project? Marcus closed the door and gestured for Ethan to sit. "I'm going to ask you a direct question," Marcus said, "and I need an honest answer. Are you romantically involved with Victoria?" Ethan's first instinct was to deny it, to protect them both, but he'd built his entire relationship with Victoria on honesty, and he wasn't going to start lying now. "Yes," he said simply. Marcus nodded slowly, as if Ethan had confirmed something he'd already known. "How long?" "A few weeks. It's new, and we've been very careful about maintaining professional boundaries at work." "I'm sure you have been," Marcus said, "but this is still a problem, Ethan. Not because I have issues with you dating anyone, but because Victoria is the CEO. The power dynamic alone creates serious complications." "I know," Ethan said. "We've talked about that extensively. We're both committed to handling this appropriately." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying Ethan. "I believe you. I also believe Victoria. But here's the reality. Perception matters as much as intention in a corporate environment. Other employees are going to notice eventually. Some will assume favoritism, others will worry about their own job security if they cross you. It creates complications regardless of your actual behavior." "So what are you saying?" Ethan asked, his chest tight. "That I need to choose between my job and Victoria?" "I'm saying you both need to be prepared for the consequences when this becomes public knowledge," Marcus replied. "And it will become public eventually. You need a plan for how to handle that." Ethan took a breath. "What would you suggest?" "Honestly, transparency. Get ahead of it before the rumor mill does it for you. Have HR document the relationship, establish clear reporting structures so there's no question of impropriety. Make it official and above board." Marcus's expression softened slightly. "I've known Victoria for a long time. I've never seen her let anyone close. If she's chosen you, there's a reason. Don't let workplace politics destroy something that could be meaningful for both of you." "Thank you," Ethan said quietly, "for the advice and for not immediately firing me." "Fire you? You just saved our biggest client relationship while managing a family crisis. You're valuable, Ethan. This relationship complicates things, but it doesn't change the quality of your work." Marcus stood, indicating the conversation was over. "Talk to Victoria. Figure out how you want to handle this. And do it soon, before someone else makes it an issue." Ethan left Marcus's office feeling shaken, but oddly relieved. The secret was out, at least to one person, and Marcus's advice made sense. Transparency was better than hiding and hoping no one noticed. He texted Victoria, "Can we talk after work? It's important." Her response came immediately. "My place, 7 o'clock." Victoria's apartment was in a modern building in Tribeca, all glass and clean lines. Ethan had never been there before, and he looked around with interest as she let him in. It was beautiful but impersonal, like a hotel suite rather than a home. Expensive furniture, abstract art, everything perfectly arranged. "It doesn't really feel like you," Ethan observed. Victoria looked around as if seeing the space with fresh eyes. "I'm never here except to sleep. I guess I never bothered making it feel like home." They sat on her pristine white couch, and Ethan explained his conversation with Marcus. Victoria listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. "He's right," she said when Ethan finished. "We need to get ahead of this. I'll talk to HR tomorrow about documentation. We'll establish clear reporting lines. You'll report through Marcus with no direct oversight from me on performance reviews or compensation decisions. Everything above board and transparent." "People are still going to talk," Ethan said. "Let them talk," Victoria replied firmly, "as long as we're handling this with integrity. I don't care what people say, and anyone who has a problem with it can bring it to me directly." Ethan smiled at her fierce protectiveness. "You're kind of terrifying when you're defensive." "Only when it comes to things I care about," Victoria said, moving closer to him on the couch. "And I care about this. About us. About making this work despite the complications." "Me too," Ethan said, pulling her close. which is why I need to tell you something else. Victoria pulled back slightly, searching his face. What? I'm falling for you, Ethan admitted. Really falling. Not just attraction or companionship or convenience. Actual feelings that are deep and real and probably foolish given how new this is. But I can't keep pretending it's anything less than what it is. Victoria's eyes shimmered with emotion. You're not alone in that. I'm falling too. Have been since the day you walked into that interview looking terrified and trying so hard to hide it. Since you fixed your crooked tie and let me see your vulnerability without shame. I thought you were fixing my tie, Ethan said. I was. But you let me. You didn't pull away or get defensive or try to maintain distance. You let me take care of you for 30 seconds, and it made me want to keep taking care of you. Victoria laughed softly. I sound ridiculous. You sound perfect, Ethan said, and kissed her. They stayed like that for a while, just holding each other, letting the weight of their admissions settle. Finally, Victoria spoke again. What do we tell Mia? She asked. About us being serious, I mean. The truth, Ethan said, that I care about you, that you care about me, that we're going to spend time together and see where this goes. She already knows you're my girlfriend. She just needs to understand that you're going to be around more. How do you think she'll take it? I think she'll be okay, Ethan said. She likes you. And she's old enough to understand that people can love more than one person, that you being in our lives doesn't mean we love her mother any less. Victoria rested her head on his shoulder. I never want to replace Sarah. I just want to be part of what you're building. I know, Ethan said. That's why this works. The following week, Victoria met with HR and formally documented their relationship. Word spread through the office with predictable speed. Ethan weathered curious glances and a few pointed questions from colleagues. Most people were supportive or at least neutral. A few were clearly skeptical about his motives or concerned about favoritism. Ethan handled it by being exactly who he'd always been. Hardworking, honest, committed to doing excellent work. He didn't get defensive or secretive. When people asked directly, he confirmed the relationship and changed the subject. Victoria addressed it in a company-wide email that was characteristically direct. She acknowledged the relationship, outlined the reporting structure changes to prevent any conflict of interest, and made it clear that professionalism and merit would continue to be the only factors in workplace decisions. Then she moved on to quarterly results and strategic priorities, treating the personal disclosure as simply one item of business among many. The gossip gradually faded as the novelty wore off and life returned to normal. 3 months after their first date, Ethan invited Victoria to Sunday dinner at his apartment. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and garlic bread and the casual domesticity of Mia helping cook while they all talked about their weeks. After dinner, while Ethan cleaned up, Victoria and Mia worked on a science project about planets. He watched them from the kitchen, Mia explaining her ideas with animated gestures, Victoria listening with genuine interest and offering suggestions that respected Mia's vision while gently improving the execution. They looked like a family. The thought hit Ethan with unexpected force, not replacing what he'd lost, but building something new, something that honored Sarah's memory while also making space for Victoria's presence. Later, after Mia was asleep, Victoria found Ethan standing in the hallway looking at a photo of Sarah. She was beautiful, Victoria said softly, studying the picture. Mia looks just like her. She does, Ethan agreed. Sometimes it's like having a piece of Sarah still here, living and growing and becoming her own person. Do you think Sarah would approve? Victoria asked. Of us, I mean. Ethan thought about his wife, her kindness, her generosity, her fierce love for their daughter. I think Sarah would want me to be happy, would want Mia to have people in her life who care about her. So yes, I think she'd approve. I think she'd like you. Victoria's hand found his, their fingers intertwining. I hope so. Because I'm planning to stick around for a long time, if you'll have me. I'll have you, Ethan said, pulling her close, for as long as you want to stay. They stood together in the quiet apartment, the city humming outside, a photo of the past on one side and the promise of the future on the other. Ethan felt the weight of both, the grief that would always be part of him and the hope that was slowly, carefully taking root. 6 months later, on a spring morning that smelled like rain and new beginnings, Ethan stood in the kitchen making pancakes while Victoria helped Mia with her math homework at the table. It was Saturday, and Victoria had stayed over, something that happened regularly now, the three of them falling into rhythms that felt increasingly natural. "Dad," Mia called. "Victoria says we should go to the Natural History Museum today. Can we?" "Sounds good to me," Ethan replied, flipping a pancake with practiced ease. "What do you want to see?" "The dinosaurs," Mia said immediately, "and the planetarium. Victoria said she'd explain about black holes." "Did she now?" Ethan shot Victoria an amused glance. "That's ambitious." "I'll simplify," Victoria said with a smile. "Age-appropriate astrophysics." They spent the day wandering through the museum, Mia bouncing between exhibits with boundless energy. Victoria answered her endless questions with patience, making complex concepts accessible without being condescending. Ethan watched them together and felt something in his chest expand with gratitude. This was what healing looked like. Not forgetting the past, but building a future that could hold both loss and love. That evening, after Mia was asleep, Ethan and Victoria sat on the fire escape outside his apartment, something they'd started doing on warm nights, watching the city lights and talking about everything. "I've been thinking," Victoria said, her voice quiet against the urban soundscape, "about what comes next. For us, I mean." Ethan's heart rate picked up. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that I'm tired of having two separate spaces when I spend most nights here anyway. I'm thinking that Mia's school is in this neighborhood and uprooting her doesn't make sense. I'm thinking that my apartment is sterile and doesn't feel like home, but this place," she gestured to the modest Brooklyn walk-up, "this feels like home." "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Ethan asked. "I'm saying I want to look for a place together. Something bigger than this apartment, in this neighborhood so Mia doesn't have to change schools. Something that's ours, that we build together." Victoria turned to look at him directly. "If that's something you want too." Ethan thought about it, really thought about it, combining their lives completely, committing to a shared future. It was a big step, especially with Mia to consider. "I need to talk to Mia first," he said carefully. "Make sure she's comfortable with the idea. This affects her as much as us." "Of course," Victoria agreed immediately. "Take whatever time you need." The next morning, Ethan sat down with Mia after breakfast while Victoria ran to the store for groceries. "Can I ask you something important?" he said. Mia set down her crayons with the seriousness she brought to important conversations. "Okay. How would you feel if Victoria lived with us? Not in this apartment, but if we found a bigger place and all lived there together?" Mia's face scrunched in thought. "Like a family?" "Like a family," Ethan confirmed. "You and me and Victoria all together. She wouldn't be your mom. Nobody could replace your mom. But she'd be someone who loves you and takes care of you and is part of our lives every day." "Would we still have time just for us?" Mia asked. "You and me?" "Always," Ethan promised. "That will never change. But there would also be time for all three of us together." Mia was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then she said, "I like Victoria. She's nice to me, and she doesn't try to pretend Mommy didn't exist, and you're happier when she's around." She looked up at Ethan with those wise eyes. "I think it would be okay." Relief washed over Ethan. "Yeah?" "Yeah," Mia confirmed. "But can we get a place with a bigger bedroom? Mine is really small." Ethan laughed and pulled her into a hug. "We can definitely look for places with bigger bedrooms." When Victoria returned from the store, Ethan met her at the door with a smile. "We talked," he said simply. "She's on board. Let's start looking." They found a place 2 months later, a 3-bedroom apartment 4 blocks from Mia's school, with high ceilings and good light, and enough space for all of them to spread out. The move happened on a sweltering July weekend, with Marcus and Rachel helping haul boxes and Victoria's assistant coordinating logistics with terrifying efficiency. Mia got the bigger bedroom she'd requested, and she decorated it with Victoria's help, a mix of her old things and new choices that reflected who she was becoming. Ethan and Victoria shared the master bedroom, and the 3rd bedroom became a home office where they could both work when needed. It felt right in a way Ethan had stopped believing was possible. A year after Ethan's initial interview, Victoria hosted a company celebration for hitting major revenue milestones. The entire staff gathered in a rented event space, celebrating collective success. Ethan stood near the bar, watching Victoria give a speech about teamwork and dedication and the importance of sustainable growth practices. She'd changed over the past year, still brilliant and demanding, but with more warmth, more willingness to acknowledge that success required balance. She caught his eye across the room and smiled, and Ethan felt the now familiar warmth of being seen, being known, being chosen. Marcus appeared at his elbow. "You two are good together," he said without preamble. "I wasn't sure at first, but I was wrong. She's different with you. Better." "It goes both ways," Ethan replied. "She makes me better too." "That's what the right partnership does," Marcus said. "Sarah would be happy for you, you know, for both of you." The comment surprised Ethan, but Marcus was right. Sarah would want him to be happy, to build a life that honored what they'd had while also making space for what could be. That night, after the celebration ended, Ethan and Victoria picked up Mia from Mrs. Chen's apartment. She was full of excitement about the cookies they'd made and the card game they'd played. Walking home through Brooklyn with Mia between them, each holding one of her hands, Ethan felt something he'd thought was lost forever. Completeness. Not because the pain of losing Sarah was gone, it would always be part of him, but because he'd learned that the human heart was more expansive than he'd imagined, big enough to hold grief and joy simultaneously, big enough to honor the past while building toward the future, big enough to love again, differently but no less deeply. That night, after Mia was asleep, Ethan and Victoria sat on their new couch in their shared apartment and talked about the future. About Mia growing up, about the company's expansion plans, about maybe taking a real vacation, the three of them, somewhere with a beach and no business obligations. About all the ordinary, extraordinary possibilities that came with building a life together. "I love you," Victoria said quietly. "I don't think I've actually said that out loud yet, but I do. I love you and I love the life we're building." "I love you too," Ethan replied, the words feeling both momentous and perfectly natural. "Thank you for being patient while I figured out how to let you in. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible to myself. Thank you for teaching me that strength doesn't require isolation," Victoria said, "that I could be powerful and vulnerable at once, that choosing connection over control doesn't make me weak." They sat together in the comfortable silence of people who'd found their way to each other against all odds. Outside, the city hummed with endless possibility. Inside, surrounded by the accumulated evidence of their blended lives, Mia's drawings on the refrigerator, Victoria's books on the shelves, photos of Sarah sharing space with new memories, Ethan felt something he'd almost stopped believing in. Home. Not the place, but the people. The family they'd chosen to become. Broken paths converging into something whole. Finally, lasting. Built not on rescue or sacrifice, but on mutual respect, honesty, and the quiet courage to trust again. And in the end, that was more than enough.